And you see her as she's looking at you from afar. And you're ordering another shot at the bar. And you know she's got that bite. And you know she sings with no pride. But tonight, let's see what she's got tonight. So I say hello there. Hey, how you doing? Well, hello there. Hey, how are you? I say hello there. I'm standing here in front, entertaining you. It's true. Let's have some fun tonight. 'Cause Angie's got the mind. And I say hello there. Hey, how are you? Let's have some fun too. Thank you. Thank you.
And now, Glenn and Tony will talk some IT.
How you doing, Tony?
Doing good.
Another
Doing good.
Thursday coming and going.
Yeah,
More stuff to be doing.
I managed to do a little homework this week.
Nice.
When we were talking last week about carpal tunnel syndrome, and
Yes.
I was curious, how it affects musicians,
hmm
and did a little googling, and it turns out it's a big problem in the music
Oh
world.
yeah, absolutely it is. Especially with certain instruments as well. Keyboards in particular, you'll see a lot of it if it's improper technique. Also with it can happen with guitars and any kind of stringed instruments as well. A lot of it just happens with repetitive stress, repetitive
Exactly. That's
motions.
the
Yeah,
key. That's the
yeah,
key is the repetitive. Like,
hmm
the guitarist who thinks I'm going to play for 6 hours straight and I'm going to become the greatest guitarist because I'm going to
yeah.
play the same solo over and over
hmm
is no different than somebody who goes into the gym and says, I'm just going to keep lifting weights till my muscles grow.
No
It's
pain, no gain.
not
Yeah,
how it
no.
works.
You got to be smart about it. You got to be smart about it for sure. And when it comes to the instruments, like people hear that 10,000 hours to mastery is something that you'll hear a lot with musical instruments. Like if you spend 10,000 hours on guitar, by then you have mastered, or you will have gotten a long way towards mastering the instrument. But it really depends what you're practicing for those 10,000 hours. And that's a perfect example. Is the person who sits there and does the same guitar solo for 10,000 hours is going to be really good at that guitar solo, but probably didn't pick up a lot else. Like there's a couple of nuggets that they might have pulled out of that and be able to use somewhere else, but for the most part, they just got really good at doing that specific thing. They didn't get good at music in general, or about being flexible, or about doing different scales, different modes, different positions, all that kind of stuff. Is important. But if they're not practicing it, they're not getting it down. So,
Well, and it's like the old saying goes, like if you make a face and your mom would be like, Your face is gonna freeze that way."
yep.
If you do that same solo over and over again, you might not be able to play any other solo.
The face that I would usually be making when she would say something like that would be something like,
God, the stinky face.
something like that. And it's stuff like that. No, going into a job interview like that. Yeah, no, that's probably not going to work out too well. Depends what you're going in for, though. I guess what the job
Yeah.
is.
So when I was looking at it, see, I thought keyboardists, which was why I was like most curious about it, is like I figured keyboardists would be the ones who would suffer from it the most, given like, but it turns out drummers, percussionists, and bass and guitarists are the
Mm-hmm.
ones that tend to have the biggest problems.
Yeah, and again, one thing I was saying was that with keyboard, I think a lot of the people who end up with injuries either are using, whether it's poor technique, improper technique, or just technique that doesn't work for them. You know, like they might be doing it correctly, like the book says do it like this, so they're doing it like this, but it hurts when they do it like this. Then don't do it like this. Figure out how to do it comfortably for yourself, or don't do it. Is the other option, because
Yeah, well,
if
like
you're going
that,
to damage yourself, it's no good.
like that video we watched last week where he was talking about arm placement and
Yeah, and
your
the wings
wrist.
being out or the wings being in. Yeah.
That's where the keyboardists tend to have their complaints is on
Mm-hmm.
their wrists more than their fingers.
Another thing is with the hand placement on the keys is one where I had somebody who I worked with at one point who had taken classical piano for a long time. Now you can see kind of in this one, some people they'll play with their, they're too high in a chair, so their wrist is kind of bent back like this, and that's no good. Like it should be flat. Like you should be able to rest a glass of water like on the back of your wrist. It should be that flat when you're starting to move up and down the piano, so that everything is in the right place. Now with the wings being in versus out, that was the other thing he was saying. Where if if you see where my hands are sitting, if the elbows are in, the thumbs are here and the fingers are there. If the thumbs are out, you can see the hands are in totally different position. So this way is better than being all the way tucked in. You don't want to be way out or way up here, but you also don't want to be pinned at your sides. You want to be comfortable. You want the wrists to be relatively flat so that things are comfortable there. And it depends what you're doing. When they do arpeggios, a lot of times they would sweep, where the wrist kind of actually goes around in a circle like this, where they're doing like a one. Like they'll do that really fast, like, but they'll do it in a circular motion as they go up like that, just because that's what feels natural as they're doing it.
And with the elbows spread out a little bit more, that should feel more free because you're kind of clenched when your elbows are, in like that.
Yep.
You're
It's hard to
actually
be comfortable. Yeah.
clenching a little bit, so it might actually help to like loosen you up.
To be back a little, sure. And that's where, anything where if it feels forced or uncomfortable or what have you, it's important not to do that. Hello, Moms Crystals. From Facebook.
Mom's is in the house.
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed. Always good.
We all got readings the other night on our show.
Nice, nice.
You weren't there. You're gonna have to.
I
You're
wasn't.
gonna have to pick two cards.
All right. I was probably at a gig. Was that Friday or Saturday? Or
It was actually earlier in the evening, before one of our shows.
Gotcha. It probably wasn't around yet. But next time, yeah, we'll make that happen. But yeah, important technique is or correct technique, I should say, correct for you personally is the important thing. Whether it's correct technique according to this book or that teacher isn't the important thing. The important thing is that it feels good or it doesn't feel bad when you're doing it. Because if you're going to hurt yourself, not good. Because then you can't play as much the next time, and that's no good. You need to build up that strength. Same thing like when I first started with bass, I had some books that I got, and one of them was about bass exercises so that you could get yourself strong on the bass. And a lot of it was just very, very, it was a whole book of like 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, just like doing all these repetitive exercises like you were talking about, where someone could sit there and do those hours and hours and hours, and you'll get better at doing those particular things, and you'll get smoother with the muscle memory, but you're not learning much about music theory. And that's why it's good to balance. You do some things that are focused on the muscle memory and the technique, some things that are focused on ergonomics, some things that are focused on learning songs, some things that are focused on just being free to express. So, some improvisation time, things like that, like having different sections of your practice time and be able to get through a bunch of different phases. And whether you want to practice everything every time or not isn't important. Like, today you might want to be all about improvisation, and tomorrow maybe you're all about songwriting, and that's fine.
Yeah, not all things are going to take a constant practice.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And some things you'll get more benefit from the practice than others. And sometimes it has to do with the timing, where, you need a certain amount of theory to kind of get yourself off the ground. And then once you can, then you could sit there and run pentatonic scales all day. And if you were looking to play the blues, for example, you could play pentatonic scales for years and do nothing but pentatonics and chromatics and things like that, and be playing blues, magically for years, without having to learn much beyond that. But if you were all of a sudden were thrown into a jazz situation, you wouldn't know what to do. Or suddenly you're thrown into a situation of a different kind of beat that you're not accustomed to, and it throws you off because you're not ready. So I like to expose myself to as many different types of music as I can, and anything that I haven't heard before, I'm always like, yep, throw it on. Let's see, let's give it a listen, and just see. Oh, okay, I can find that root note. Okay, I can see that it goes to a 5 then, and then kind of feel what the song does, and work it out from there.
Yeah, and usually for me, it is the beat. Like, it's not so much changing genres as it is the different beats that genres bring into the, the mix.
Yep.
That's the part that takes some adjustment for me. I mean, I
Yeah.
feel jazz. I hear it. I can comprehend like what a jazz musician is doing. Once I start trying to play those beats, it's like, oh, how do I get my playing to work with that beat?
Yeah. And a lot of times it comes down to learning one hand, learning the other hand, trying to put them together at half speed, trying to speed it up from there. It's kind of a process because you do have to kind of figure it out where if it's the left hand that's giving you trouble or if it's just the timing. Whereas a lot of those things, like if it's ragtime, you're doing a lot of back and forth, a lot of syncopation with the beats. So you're doing totally different things with this hand than this hand. So this hand has to kind of be on autopilot doing doom, 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 or whatever it's doing.
Yeah,
And the other hand's doing something totally different.
it's getting like my hand into autopilot mode.
Yep.
I,
And that's where
I'm a very conscientious. Like as soon as I start thinking about like what my hand's doing, all of a sudden my hand feels like it's out of control.
you're like, no, go back to what you were doing before I started thinking about it.
No, it's like running down a hill, and then reaching that point where you're going too fast for your own legs.
Overrunning your legs, yeah, yeah. You don't want to get there, no. But that happens musically, yeah. There were times where we would work on songs in rehearsal, and there were some that I could just barely do the bass line the way it's supposed to be done. And we're playing the song in rehearsal, and this is out in Pennsylvania like 8 years ago. And everything's fine, just barely getting it, just barely have it at speed. We get it to a gig, and the drummer kicks into the song at like plus 20% speed. So we're going 120% speed, and there's just no way I can make that groove happen at that speed at that time. So I'm like, I'm trying to fumble into it, and I'm just like looking at him like, what are you doing? Like, because this is not how we played this song.
The drummer slowed down to.
Well, no, he was like basically adrenalined up from a live show, so he was playing it faster. He started it faster than he should have, and never slowed down. Like refused to slow down at all. Just kept boom ta boom ta boom ta, like kept it going at a speed where I couldn't do anything.
You guys were trying to
So I got
keep
screwed.
up with the tempo, yeah.
Yeah, basically because like the song, the song can be played at 120% speed. I just couldn't make the bass line work with my fingers at that time in my career. I hadn't been playing long enough to make it work at that speed. So I'm sitting there on stage basically like fumbling with finding a new line to work in that same, time, space, and genre. And I'm just like, this is not the way we should do this. Like we should totally do it the way we did it in practice, at the speed we did it in practice, and then we'd be fine. But we didn't have issues like that very often. It was just one of those things, and it only was an issue on like a particular song where I'm really right at the edge, the bleeding edge of how fast I could play, was the issue there. And he would just say, "Oh, practice more." It's like, well, yeah, but like not right now. like since 3 days ago when we played the song and it was totally fine and sounded awesome, to now you decided to go 20% faster for no good reason. And it's like, let's not do that.
Well, you can remind him like that you don't want to damage yourself.
Exactly. You do not want the common hand injuries for musicians from the hand surgery specialists of Texas.
And this is a legit concern as a
Absolutely.
musician. Like
Absolutely. Repetitive stress injury, RSI.
these are the different types of repetitive injuries that one can get from overplaying or not paying attention to what they're doing. And I mean, some of them are, natural ailments. In some cases, it's your physical structure that might be instigating the problem. And in the case of like some of the repetitive stuff, it could be overplaying and things like that. Because tinnitus, um, that's something that you might get regardless of whether you're playing instruments or typing on keyboards.
Yep. Or turning valves or turning a wrench or whatever. There's any number of ways that you could repetitively injure yourself just by doing the same motions over and over.
Yeah, and it's one of those ones where some of these can become irreversible. So there's a reason to want to try to avoid those problems.
Yep.
Carpal tunnel. This is the one where in office world and computer world,
Yep.
they've been talking about it now for a couple of decades.
And that's again has to do with bad ergonomics, like people sitting with their wrists either kinked way too far back because they're sitting too high, or they're sitting too low and their hands are like this. They're just not paying attention to the right, the right height they should be sitting at, and the right, the right back support, the right angle of everything. All that's very important.
Yeah, and you remember all those keyboards and mice and things that they started coming out with in the 90s saying, oh, they recognized that carpal tunnel was a problem, so they started coming out with ergonomic peripherals. And the irony is that if you used them for too long, a lot of them were actually worse in some cases because they were forcing people to do just like you said, hold their wrists in ways that would instigate the problem.
Now, the most unique one I saw, I think I mentioned it once before, the like right below the space bar on the keyboard was basically a roller. Like this is a drumstick, but basically it was a roller where if you wanted to move the mouse up on the screen, you would just roll this big fat roller that was like, almost the length of the keyboard, but you just roll this very gently up and down, and it would also slide on its axis, left and right. So you just you basically you don't have to grip anything. You could use your arm and just kind of roll either way. It would be very easy to make it happen with anything really. So like for that, I could see it being very useful in that way. The ones that I saw that were more, the one I have always been a fan of, I think Tony and I are the only ones that I know of who use the thumb ball, trackball, where it's, the small, basically for me, I got a very big hand, so for me the whole thing just disappears, but it's almost like a mouse in my hand, but it's got the ball for the thumb, and then it's got the buttons like a regular mouse, it's got the wheel and all that.
And
so
much as I love the trackball, I wouldn't be surprised if it actually is more of an instigator than say a mouse, because you really, once your hand's on it, mine can sit there for 10 hours on that trackball.
But that's why I would always, when I was in an office environment, I would always have one of those little gel wrist rests, because as long as my wrist is elevated by that like inch or two, so basically same idea as with the piano. Like I want my wrist to be this way, flat. I don't want to be this way. So like this is where you'll end up feeling it if you're like trying to click and do stuff with your wrist linked back like that, or if you're up on a table like that.
Your hand goes to sleep. Like I've had like my hand go to sleep because I'm killing the blood flow.
Yeah, and that's again just important to be comfortable with whatever you're doing so that you're not causing yourself issues. Yeah. Because that's those are the kinds of things that are the most avoidable, because it's basically just like, oh, I just shouldn't sit that way. It's not something you have to like buy something new or do something crazy or come up with a whole new routine. It's just like, no, does this feel good? No? Okay, well, how about this? Oh, that's better. Okay, we'll do that. It's one of those, just do what makes sense in that respect.
Yeah. And now trigger finger, that for music, that was a new one for me, because I do understand it like in the case of like somebody whose hand starts to lock in like a trigger kind of approach. But with music, that could really be a pain in the ass.
Some of them would be like using, like if the tendons, like I don't know if you could see that at all, but like only having the very last bit of the finger bent, the rest of it's straight.
And see where they say like it's usually caused by overly gripping. So like when you think about it, like the guitarist who like just sits there and clenches when they're not playing, especially if they do it for long periods of time, could be doing a little bit of harm there.
And that is an important exercise that they'll have you do for a beginner guitarist, is as you're hitting each note, you like try to play your scales and play your chords, but you're trying to do it where you're just hitting it just hard enough. You're pressing the strings just hard enough to make the notes ring out, but not so hard that you're bending them out of tune. Because if you really do grip them too hard, like somebody could be playing an A minor chord and it'll sound like it's bent out of tune, even though everything is tuned properly, and it's because they're gripping it too hard and they just end up bending the strings out of tune. It could also be bad finger placement, where instead of having the fingers just behind the fret wire where you want it to be, they're like in the middle area. Especially this happens a lot on the frets that are furthest down, the ones that are spaced apart the furthest. The ones that are spaced out farther, if you hit in the middle of the fret, it'll be a different sound. Let me see. Is this on?
Now you fret harder on a bass than you do on a guitar, right?
Somewhat, because the strings are heavier, so you have to push harder. But there's still, the amount of tension isn't that much different. It's more of a question of once you get used to doing a lot of like slides and things like that on the bass, it toughens up the fingers, so that if I go back to guitar, everything seems easier on guitar than it did before. But either one, you could get very strong fingers just from using either. My point was just that if you were playing down here, for example, where the frets are further apart, if you're playing like this is A and B flat, but B flat here is one thing, that's just hitting the same note but hitting it too hard. You can hear it tuning out, like going beyond where it should. And that's because I'm just pushing it too hard, and that's something you don't want to do. You want to fret very gently.
Yeah, you don't need to push down so hard to make a fret work. I mean, that's something you want to find a healthy balance when you first start playing an instrument like that.
And especially if you're starting to do stuff like jazzier chords, you're starting to play stuff that's higher up on the neck. You want things that'll ring out nicely but smoothly. So if I was pushing that too hard, it would sound very ugly. But if you're doing it just hard enough to make it ring out, and also I'm just using the fleshy part of my thumb and just kind of brushing the strings. And then when I want them to stop making sound, I just kind of release the pressure with my left hand.
See, I can see how certain genres could instigate, a little more tension. Like obviously you're playing metal really hard and you're like clenched. You might be gripping like, that neck a lot harder playing metal than you would say playing smooth jazz.
And I could see the shoulder on the picking side going out, or the whole arm on the picking side if you're going just daga 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 like all day, whether you're making that happen. And that's one that Victor Wooten, a very famous bass player, one of the things that he would talk about is if he has a song where he might be doing 12 minutes where he's just doing the same, doom, 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 like doing the same line for 12 minutes. He's got to be able to do that. And, it could be a very demanding line as far as the hands go. But so he has a way like he can make it happen just kind of pulling from the shoulder, where he's using the shoulder to kind of do most of the work of moving the hand up and down. Or he could do it from the wrist and make the wrist do most of the work, or he could do it just from the fingers, or he could do it from the hand. So like he's using all these different ways of making things work so that he could do it and switch it around. So like the hand's getting tired, okay, pull from the shoulder now, okay, now, do that for a little bit, and then do it from the wrist. Yeah.
When you started playing guitar and bass, did you ever deal with shoulder getting used to like the strap, like the guys who are standing and I've had guitarists who complained about like their shoulder hurting from the strap.
For me, I'm lucky that with my bass, the strap I have is it's a Fender strap, and it's basically made of like a very springy material.
And I would think where you place the strap, like in the shoulder fold, would have a lot to do with whether it irritates you. Because obviously, if you're not putting it in the right place and it's there for hours, eventually it is going to annoy you.
You see how like really fat this is compared to like most straps are very skinny, like the base part of it over here.
That's like
the skinny
a
part.
pillow.
So yeah, this is like, and it's actually springy too. So it's almost like the same thing they made like a wetsuit material almost. So it's like it's stretchy. So when I have the bass on my shoulder, and if I just like kind of bounce up and down a little bit, you can feel it kind of give. So it kind of like bounces a little bit with it. So it really is like a pillow as far as like I've never had anything softer than this one. For the guitar is not nearly as heavy, so I'm not worried about it. But for the guitar, I have strap locks, which instead of just having the strap just connect the way it does here, they actually lock in so that they won't let go. So that those are the ones where you could actually throw the guitar over your shoulder or whatever, and like the straps won't let go.
Style.
Yeah. You're basically trusting the straps not to let go at that point. But I wouldn't do that with the bass strap just because it's not locked on like that. Whereas the guitar is. I think the guitar strap is in the case though. So to answer the question though, I almost never play standing up unless I'm at a gig. And at a gig, I'm usually playing bass. So I have the bass strap, and it's got that nice comfortable thing there. And sometimes I'll sit on my bass amp, or I have a like a high stool I could sit and kind of lean back on as I'm playing. But I will stand also. I mean, it doesn't it looks better to stand, I'm sure. And I don't really dance around as much as a lot of people would on stage. But I just kind of I'm just kind of there playing bass. But it's it's not really my job to be the the entertainment on stage. I'm just kind of in the back, holding it down for everybody else. And there, get the lead guitar player and the lead singer, and people are the lead instrumentation are doing their thing, and I'm just kind of back there
Hey,
doing other things.
nothing wrong with a bouncy bassist.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing is that's something I've tried to work on too, is to try to even just getting just a little bit more of this, get the little rocking in there and stuff like that, and being able to look away is another one that's important because I spend a lot of time just staring at my fretting hand when I'm playing it because I'm making sure I'm hitting the right notes in the right place. And I can do just fine when I'm not looking, but I can get distracted easily if I'm not looking. And then if I make a mistake, I'm like, oh, I made a mistake because I'm not looking. But if I was looking, I wouldn't have made the mistake. So I just feel like it sounds better if I am looking and I know I'm hitting the right spot.
I'm so backwards. When I look, I make mistakes. When I zone out, the hands do their thing.
Yeah, zoning out's important. Now let's see what else we had here. We have. Yeah, for the trigger finger, that was one where it was again like I can kind of simulate it where it's more like when you have just those last parts of the finger bent and the rest is all straight, like it's kind of locked like that. That could be kind of what that's like, trigger finger wise.
And gripping is the thing overly gripping is the thing you want to avoid there.
Mm-hmm. The thoracic outlet sounds like that's up in here, up in like like you're saying, the neck pocket.
That's what I was wondering. When you get into the bowed
Yeah.
instruments.
Well, the ones that specifically that are up in here that you're holding with your chin, because now you're using a muscle to kind of pinch your shoulder to your chin, and that's where you have the instrument sitting. Because you have your chin is kind of sitting on the instrument, and the instrument is kind of resting on your shoulder, but it's in that pocket.
Yeah,
But you can a lot of times you're trying to pull your shoulder up, and that can give you some problems there.
Look what it ends up affecting. I mean, it makes total sense.
Yeah.
You're sitting there playing this way, and you do it for long practices. You're definitely putting a lot of pressure in that shoulder area.
And again, it comes down to playing comfortably, playing loosely, playing relaxed. Like all those are very key because if you can just, and if you feel yourself getting tense, you just kind of take a minute and just, shake it off and then kind of settle back in and try to stay comfortable is the main thing. Very important.
Actually, the next tab I have is going to give a couple of suggestions on how to practice without killing yourself.
Yeah, definitely.
Thumb arthritis. Now, I have felt this. Actually, sometimes I feel it in different fingers depending on what I'm trying to play, and you probably see me constantly like trying to
work it out
crack
almost.
and like shake it out of me.
Mm-hmm. Those can work for sure.
And again, the pinching and grasping. Try to avoid it or do it, properly.
Yeah. And it should be proper for you, comfortable for you. Like just because it says it on a web page or says it on, we say, oh, the right way to do it is X, Y, Z. It's like make sure it's comfortable for you because the right way to do it is only right if it's right for you.
I don't even know how to say this one.
Flexor.
Tenosynovitis.
Tenosynovitis, yes.
Although this one sounds more like an infection. That's not your normal situation.
Numbness and swelling in the fingers shortly after playing an instrument.
Although I have heard of musicians who complain about things like, Pat had problems with his hands swelling and all of that happening, and who knows, it could be something like that. Cubital tunnel syndrome, this one's new too.
See, that one sounds like it's on the inside of the elbow, as opposed to where the carpal tunnel is more across the back of the wrist or the forearm.
But again, the symptoms are a lot like some of the other ones, where you get that kind of tingly, numb sensation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's why again, if it's uncomfortable, if it causes tingling, numbness, pain, stop immediately. Reevaluate what you're doing and find either a better way to do it or figure out what it is that you're doing improperly or how you can do it better.
Try to avoid being in a bent position for too long.
And again, if you can be in a bent position if you're loose and relaxed, but if you're like you're in this bent position because you're trying to learn this part and if you're really tensed up like that, you're really causing yourself more issues than if you were to just step away, shake it out, relax, come back, try again. If you're still not getting it, step away, shake it out, come back, try again. It's just one of those things. Repeat as necessary. If you got to slow it down, slow it down. If you have to simplify the part at first to get through it so that you're getting your head wrapped around the timing of the part, that helps sometimes too. Just kind of put a skeletal part together where you're not playing it as complexly as you will play it eventually, but it does get the general idea across and gets the, the right changes and gets the melody going the right way. Things like that. Musician's Hand Clinic.
Yeah, so as I was looking around to see, like, where do you go if you are having a specific problem with carpal tunnel and you're a musician, and turns out there are actual resources out there.
Hmm.
These were one of them. And they do have a lot of articles in here, techniques you can use to avoid it,
Hmm.
symptoms you want to look for to know what the problem.
Yep. It's important.
And my ching
A little bit.
quite.
A little bit glitchy. But it's trying to load.
Oh, I'm clicking on the tab. It's not changing.
You might just have to do the share this tab instead.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do.
Or you'd have to stop it and start it again. Either way is good.
Yeah. That might be what I have to do.
Like magic. There you go. What do we have over here? Angie's got some
Yeah, I think
unicorn kitty rainbow
it
action
ate
happening.
my Chrome.
Was it delicious? Nom 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 nom. Hey Jason, what's happening?
I think it's still.
Yeah, my machine was acting really weird the other day. I had to give it a kick, rebodify, and then it was all better. I am pretty bad about that. I don't reboot as often as I should. But it is the first thing I'll do when I notice things are starting to act a little bit wonky, is right to the reboot and say, did you see that? Okay, better? Good, okay. Now don't start that nonsense again. Or else I'll break out the screwdriver, and when it sees me break out the screwdriver, then it knows it's in trouble. Big trouble.
Yeah, Restream won't let go of my tab share. I even removed it. It's still eating my browser.
Yeah, you might just have to end the task over there.
I
Crazy.
did. It doesn't want to end.
No. Is that the one that's third on my list there? It looks like the Starfield background that's kind of frozen.
No. I actually removed the share, so
Gotcha.
I got a Chrome here that's just not stopped. It thinks it's still.
The boss. But it is mistaken. We know that for sure. We'll find some
I'll
more.
have to test this machine more with the sharing.
Mm-hmm. What else do we have for rainbow cat gifts for Angie over here? Oh, there we go. Glowy rainbow cat. Just for you, Ange. She's always a fan.
Yeah, I've lost all browser control.
We've lost control. Whoop,
And
whoop,
I
whoop.
can't do anything
Alert.
from these browsers.
Well, they are a mess. Let's see what we have here. We have a number of things that we can hit. Some of them we looked at already, but other ones we were going to look at fresh. One of them was Circle of Fifths for songwriting. And that was one that we were going to look at from a new page. We also had some that we were going to look at, some of our friends that we've looked at previously, and we were going to look at and get the follow, or the subscribe, I should say, from our YouTube channel.
We definitely
we're
got
gonna
to
look at a
check
couple
and
of
see if Jake is in there. 'Cause
Exactly.
He should be.
He should be, yes, for sure. He's one. Another one would be Venus Theory was another one that we looked at. We should get in there for sure. This one was a new one that I found, Circle of Fifths for songwriting, and it was from Mike George, and that was one that I just subscribed to. I think the video was about 10 minutes, Circle of Fifths for songwriting, talking about just again which chords you're trying to use and what you're trying to do with them, that sort of a thing. In some cases, we usually use it more. I like the visuals in a lot of cases where it's not even the video itself, but it's just some nugget that I pulled out of it that I particularly liked. In this case, I like the way that it wraps the 7 chords that you're trying to use in one kind of shape, that you can then move that shape around the wheel and see exactly which 7 chords you should be using for your songwriting. Something that you can do with the Circle of Fifths anyway, but this kind of lays it out in a better visual style, or an easier to see, I should say, visual style. That's what we can check
I
out.
finally let go of my browser. I got my browser back.
Like magic, Tony's back in control. The mutiny has been averted. Gotta hate when the tabs start to mutiny.
Yeah, that's the first time I've had to do that.
It was like serious and stuff. Let's see if that's any better for you. Got that one, and we got that one. Yep, that does look better. What's happening, Maha? We see ya.
Hey, Maha.
Popping in.
Or hi.
That's right. You got to pronounce it right. That's
Hiya.
right.
Hiya.
Hi. Hi. That's the way. Hi. Just to be sure. Let's see here. Now, I was working with the different visualizers over here to see what we have. Some of these are working better than others. We got this one, looks pretty decent.
Hey, you're getting great frame rates.
Nice. We've got some of the cameras. We've got the Meticulous. For the Meticulous. It's looking good. Yeah, with these guys, this is essentially just 3 different web pages, 3 different YouTubes that are running simultaneously and just rearranged with OBS to be in the way that they are. And it's actually, I think, the same video in 3 different places. But I do like the fact that it looks like 3 entirely different visualizers.
You find them at the right spots. They are 3 different visualizers.
Yep. And that was where some of them, like with the video that I use for the art stuff, which I use for like these are actually also, it's like the same video, different places, but you end up seeing, sometimes you'll see the same thing kind of in 2 different places. Like this looks a little like that, but not exactly. But
well, and every once in a while, Ange pops in.
and you just see Ange pop in, yep. with its attempt at recreating her face, where sometimes it's like, yeah, but it was trying. But it took a little bit too much artistic license.
She makes so many faces, I don't think a computer could keep up with her.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Oh, there's one. She's in
There's
the
one.
forest. Oh, there's one. She's in a Van Gogh.
Yeah, Van Gogh. That's what that one was. And I think that Tangled Knot one was also one that started that way, but just went way, way down that path. There were some cool ones though, like the Tulip Fields and some that have like that MC Escher thing going on. I'm gonna have to start making some more of these. They've been improving the models and improving the stuff that's going on with the AI, making it easier to work with and making it easier to fine-tune different things. And also now you're able to feed it images as starting points, plus you can do video with it, where you can take one of these images and actually make a video from it.
It's the video-centric AI that I'm most curious.
Yeah, that's going to be some cool stuff. We're going to mess with that for sure. Let's see here. The keyboard even almost in the right place. All right. I definitely knocked the keyboard over earlier. Like knocked it out of position. I was like, now I got to figure out where the camera was. Get everything back to where it should be. But that's not too bad. The camera's a little bit high.
There you go.
That works.
And your hands look like a Palmolive commercial. Not only does he have an awesome voice, he's got perfect hands.
Yes, indeed. Perfect hands for piano, or bass, or guitar, or a little bit of drums, but really with the drums, or actually percussion. That's kind of fun too. Like sitting down at the congas is a lot of fun. That's one thing that after working with bands and working with some really good percussionists, seeing how they work and seeing, the different techniques that make it all happen, because it's not all just the timing. Timing is important, obviously, for percussion, drums, anything, but there's also a lot of technique involved. And if you get just a couple of those techniques and you get them down right, you can really make it look like you know a lot more than you do about percussion. Like some of these open jams, they'll just have congas set up there so that, somebody can just go up and join whoever happens to be on stage. And so people will just kind of step up and just do their thing. And it's just fun to just jump in and do something. And then if you do play something else later, they're like, wait, you also play bass, not just congas? And I was like, well, congas is just kind of messing around, It's like,
Yeah,
I'm just over there for fun.
natural. That I feel like I can play congos, bongos, hand drums. I'm totally comfortable with.
Yeah.
Sticks are a little weird.
Sticks can be a little weird. I mean, they're fun too, and you can make it work just as well, just as easily as you can with the hand drums. But with hand drums, it is kind of one less thing in between you and making the music, in a similar way to playing bass
I feel more
fingerstyle.
connected. I feel more connected to the drum because you are the stick.
Yeah, and the same thing with fingerstyle bass. Like I feel fingerstyle bass, I'm more connected to the bass than I am if I'm playing with a pick. Although there are some things that are, you can, it's faster to play with pick, you can do that kind of thing, but I don't play a lot of songs that have that kind of speed with them. Or if I had lines that were going to do that, I could just use 2, 3, or 4 fingers to kind of like diddle 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 and like pull the strings that way, and it kind of mimics that same kind of a galloping sound. But again, I just, it does feel like when I play, the fact that I learned bass kind of first and got adjusted or got used to playing and muting strings and playing everything with just the fingers, made it so that when I switch to guitar, I have an easier time playing fingerstyle guitar a lot of times than I do playing with a pick. With a pick, if I'm doing speed picking or fast lines, I can do them faster and louder with a pick than I can without. But most of the time, I prefer just playing with my fingers because it's easier for me to feel more, like I said, more connected to the instrument, but also more able to mute selectively on the strings because I can use like these fingers to mute these strings and do things with these other fingers. Whereas with a pick, I feel like I'm just doing that.
It's the same way with me with the keyboards. The weighted keys, I can't play as fast, I can't bounce as quick, but
there are advantages.
Feels more organic to me than when I go to a plastic keyed synthesizer and I feel like I'm playing a simulated piano.
Yeah, and sometimes it does come down even just to the sound, where some of these, like this piano happens to sound pretty good. And it sounds like a piano to me. It's like, doesn't sound like tinny. Like sometimes you have some of these, like if you go with electric, that's electric grand. That sounds a little bit more faked, I would say.
And a difference like that. If you're playing an electric piano, you don't mind the plastic feel, or an organ. Certain keyboard sounds feel fine with bouncy plastic keys, whereas an acoustic piano sound is half the battle.
Yeah.
The feel behind an acoustic piano is the other half.
Yeah, and there are certain, like you said, there are certain lines, certain motifs, certain sounds that you can really only get with the weighted keys, and there are certain sounds that you really can't get with the weighted keys, or you can't do it easily. Like you're saying with the very fast.
The bounce. Yeah. That.
Like that's just 2 fingers. That's just these 2, 1 and 2, and that is similar to what I'm doing when I'm galloping really fast on the bass. I'm just using those same 2.
Yes. See how fast it responds. Me, if I try to do that on the weighted keys, by the time I'm hitting with the second finger, it's still trying to come up and
the rebound. Yep. And that's why lines like that you need, and that's why a lot of times I think on stage you'll see people have a weighted set of keys, a weighted 88 keyboard if they're doing serious piano stuff, as well as something that is definitely not a weighted keyboard for everything else that needs to be fast. That kind of thing also. Like you can do that a lot easier on these. And that's one also where one trick that I've seen people do a lot is you do that slide where you're, but if you're going to slide into a chord, rather than trying to slide and land on that chord where it is, you're already eyeing up that chord and you're just kind of sliding randomly towards it from the other hand. So like, and then you're just landing with the chord with this hand.
It's funny. My piano teachers used to bitch at me when I would do that on the uprights. Ah, you're gonna
Yeah.
lock the hammers.
Yeah, they don't. I mean, on a real piano, they don't like that for sure. One that
Yeah.
I've seen my cousin Jeff do, that was it was like a smush where he's just using the hand. And he's like trying to come around. He was trying to like basically come from hit the black notes over on this side, and then the E flat, and then land on the E. And it was just kind of like doing some line what he was doing over here, and then and it was just like a little smooth little hand motion like that. I was like, what the hell was that? Because like it wasn't a fingers, it wasn't a it was somewhere in between, something that you don't normally see. I was like, that was cool.
Yeah, those kind of rolls. I mean, Jeff is fancy.
Yeah, yep. And it's like doing same thing like that. Like those are easier to do fast on the light keys because the keys are very responsive. On the weighted keys though, you could probably do something like that, like the little arpeggiating like that. You could probably do those that fast on a weighted keyboard, but it's when you're
Yeah,
trying to just do.
Those are fine with weighted keys. I don't have too much of a problem doing like triads.
But like even what I was doing before with the two fingers, if you just use one finger, like see how fast you can get that going with just one finger, and it's just being loose with the finger and seeing if you can different finger, and just seeing like how fast you can get. I mean, not that you're always going to do those in songs or whatever, but just being able to kind of checks where you are on the speed. It's like when you're checking your BPM of typing. How fast can you type words, or how fast can you play music. It's figuring out your speed bumps or where your progress is.
It's funny. I can type faster than I can play.
Well, me too, probably. Yeah, I've always been a very fast typist from doing tech support and doing video games for so long. It was typing well over 100 words a minute is very has always been easy. But
Programming.
Yep.
Once I became a programmer, like I went from like 120, 130 characters to like
200.
probably hitting the 200s.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's accurate typing because when you're programming like from your head, it's not like trying to notate or dictate or anything like that. When you're truly programming and you're thinking and telling the computer what to do, sky's the limit on speed.
Yep. And that's the thing with if you're listening to a song and someone's like, "Oh, we got to look up the lyrics for this." I'm like, "Well, just put the song on." So they put the song on, and while it's playing, just real time, I'll just type the lyrics out while they're happening. Because it's like I can, you can have a little bit of a buffer where you're listening back, and you can type fast enough to stay ahead of it. And sometimes you'll abbreviate things or jump ahead because oh, I know that part, so skip ahead and do this part. But like one playthrough, and we've got the lyrics, and we can go ahead and just go right through it. It's like not a big deal. It's just the way it works. I can type as fast as most people talk, and with songs, there's always those breaks also in between where coming back around with whatever, you have that little time to fill in what you missed or fix mistakes. But like you said, mistakes don't happen very often once you get to those speeds in typing. It's just where the keys are in your hands. You don't have to tell your hands what to do. The weird thing though is if you ever find
muscle memory there is set.
If you ever find yourself shifted over one, or shifted up a row on one hand just because you weren't paying attention, or you did something, you look back and then you look back at what you typed, you're like, what? It's like one mistake I could understand, but like 75 in a row, like definitely not.
If I'm trying to type in the dark,
Sure.
I got to enter in my password to log in. But usually I use the notches, the two notches on the keyboard. Like I calibrate my hands with those two little notches, and from there.
This is the light up keyboard though.
So you could type it.
So it's blue right now, but like if I could say, then it's also it's red. Or I say, oh, it's green. I know Angie likes green, so we'll go, oh, it's green.
That's Angie's preset.
Yeah. It's also very dusty, but that was one of those that in a completely pitch black room, I always know where the keys are, and I can always find those home keys too because they got the little nub on them, like you said, the F and the J, or the G and the H, F and the J.
Chris Allen in the house. How you doing, buddy?
What's happening, man?
Hey, Big John. Follow us either on BandLab or YouTube, and I will check out your SoundCloud. We might not play it because playing SoundCloud is kind of tricky, but I will check out your SoundCloud.
And we'll see what we find over there. So far, we're just doing some standard stuff, looking at some music stuff. We were talking about some medical conditions that can be caused by repetitive stress that Tony was looking at over there. We lost his tab over there. We had to perform surgery to get his tabs back, but I think he's good now.
I had a medical condition.
Yep. We were about to break out the paddles. Clear! Get that sucker back. But I think he's all good now. And then it's just a question of what we would like to discuss next. We have a few options.
I think I do have it. The last one that I had was on the tips on how to avoid or to
Yes.
alleviate see if those
Repetitive
come up.
stress injuries.
There we go.
Let's see, one of those was tenosynovitis, right? I think that's what it was.
Yeah, you can say it.
The defibrillator. Clear!
But they do give you a link to some videos on different tricks you can do to stretching exercises and things like that. But the tips are somewhat common sense. Take a break every 20 to 30 minutes.
Stand up, walk around.
So your fingers don't fall off.
Now that next one is interesting. Avoid exercisers of the hand
Yes.
like stress balls. That's
Yeah,
interesting
yeah.
because that is one that some people would just go and say, "Oh, I got to make it stronger, so let me use the grippers like those
Yes,
to get stronger."
and look at the ones they say not to do. These would be the ones people would like instinctively think, oh, the stress ball or these grips are going to somehow help get my hand in shape. But no, like these would actually instigate more of a problem than help in the case of musicians.
They're saying exercise doing a reverse flex with an elastic band, where you're basically the opposite of the squeeze.
Yeah, I really like that one you
Interesting.
showed me last week, that like gravity ball approach, because it keeps your hand motion and your wrist constantly
Engaged.
rebalancing.
Yep.
It's a much better approach to an exercise.
I want to say that one was called the Dynaflex. Maybe we could look that one up if you want to on there. But it was that was one of the models, was the Dynaflex. But the idea is that it's a very fast spinning gyroscope essentially, and you're fighting against it. You're trying to force it to go into precession, and it doesn't want to, so it wants to stay perfectly still. And you're trying to force it in all the directions, so you're basically using the muscles in all directions.
And
which
they're
can help a lot.
They're as cheap as flex balls. I mean, we were seeing them for like $4.
Yeah, those are pretty cheap. Yeah, and that's where again, there's a little different than these are, but
This is an interesting suggestion too. Doing a reverse flex
yep,
of the fingers and thumbs.
with just an elastic band.
Yeah. If you look at their examples down there, this I have done in the past.
And even if you don't have an elastic band, this is the kind of thing that you can literally just take one hand and the other, and if you just do this, like you can,
yeah.
one hand is kind of holding the other back, and the other is, if I can find my camera, but it looks like a jellyfish.
See, and like they say, you don't have to do it a lot. You do it a few times to build it up, and I mean the real key is to not overexert, not over,
And to gently build strength. This is about gently building strength over time.
And they even tell you can buy these number 32 elastic bands at any office store.
Because they're in every office.
Thank you.
And they're saying, don't go out and get the one that's like, 400 pounds of tension.
Well, yeah, the bigger band's gonna be more tension.
The claw, there it is. The claw. The rosebud and the claw.
See, and again, don't be afraid to go look on YouTube for exercises and suggestions. There's a world of resources out there. And it's funny because a lot of the ones you'll find might not necessarily be catered towards musicians, but some of the other exercises like yoga and things like that can actually help.
There's crossover,
Not
yeah.
not just to avoid like carpal tunnel, but in some cases to loosen up, get into the mood.
Yep. Bicycle tubes for strength training, yep. And building dexterity, important, yeah.
Yeah,
The one I
I'm
had at one point.
I'm definitely considering doing some yoga and qigong, Viva's
Yeah.
kind of meditation approach, just
Absolutely.
to loosen up before I start jamming.
Yeah, and some of the, I mean, I love watching her shows. I go in and do some meditation, do some of the exercises, get the energy flowing, get some relaxation going. It's very very
I
good.
actually get relaxed just watching her.
Yeah, absolutely. Doing the motions is helpful too. Get the energy flowing in your own body. It's very good.
Yeah, see, and this is just a reinforcement on the other things they were saying, like, keep it short, not intense stretching, but yeah, heavy lifting. See, that one's kind of common sense to me, man. Like, I don't like heavy lifting, period.
Hmm.
But yes, if I'm actually doing stuff and I feel like I might damage my hands trying to do heavy work, that's always. I worked in construction for the first 20 years of my life. I was always worried about like messing my hands up.
Hmm. That's interesting. Do alternate ice and heat. The next one
Yeah,
there.
yeah. Oh, before you go to bed, not before you practice.
Hmm.
See, that's kind of like, an athlete after they're done, like say football practice and, going and doing the ice bath afterwards or and they did mention as I was looking around at all these things, they did mention there's a lot of relation between athletic injuries and some of this
Hmm.
with musicians. Like they
Hmm.
kind of
A lot of
share some of
crossover. Yeah.
yeah, they share some of the same symptoms, they share some of the same problems.
And you see that right there? From zero to greatness in 10,000 hours. We were talking about that before.
Yeah.
4 hours a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year for 6.8 years gets you your 10,000 hours. But don't just sit there and practice the same thing every hour for those 10,000 hours. You have to know what to practice to get better. Know what you need to
Otherwise,
practice.
you'll be a one solo
One solo wonder. Yeah.
guitarist.
Yep.
Susceptible to it. That's something we always have to ask ourselves. Some of it can be genetics, some of it can be like the job that you're doing or the amount of time you're practicing.
Now, one that I was bringing up a number of times is that because of the fact that I've done so much video game stuff and so much music stuff over the years, I have very strong forearms, very strong hands. But there were still times where if I was heavily playing, let's say Call of Duty, for example, and we're using the controller and same kind of thing, like you're squeezing harder than you should because of stress situations or what have you. Like if I'm playing Call of Duty for hours and hours and then try to play guitar or bass for hours and hours, I would find that I was using the same muscles or burning out the same muscles so that I could like end up playing too much video games where now I can't play music as much as I wanted to. And I'm like, well, this sucks. It's like,
Yeah,
it's
but,
like,
and
that's
and
no
all of this is very relevant to video gamers. I mean, that's I would say that's likely the field where they're seeing the biggest growth in carpal problems more than office or musicians. Gamers can get lost into 10, 12 hours and they are clenched and very
and
involved
ergonomics are not the key a lot of times. Like if they know what to look for, you got to be comfortable in a good gaming chair, you got to have good posture, you got to have this, that. If you really do set yourself up in a good scenario like that, then you can sit there 18 hours a day, no problem. But if you don't, it's very easy to miss just one thing and you say, oh, I like having my arm up on like this or whatever over here. It's like that one thing could just throw everything off and make it so that you really shouldn't be doing that, because
yeah.
now
So
you're going to cause yourself problems.
if you guys are are gamers, consider like if you're a musician and a gamer, consider what you're doing so that you don't mess either up.
Yep. Don't let your hobbies impact each other that way. Because again, I've had it happen. And I was like, this is not cool. And so I had to like literally step away and not play games and not do music or keep it minimal for a couple of days. Did more theory stuff and watching video stuff than actually practicing. But in the same thing, like I could switch over and practice some piano instead, where it's different muscles that I'm using now.
Have you ever seen this? The what do they call this? A palm stretching pad?
No. It almost looks like, I've seen some wrist supports before that look like the same kind of thing where it goes around the hand as well as going around the wrist, but not that specific one.
Well, what's interesting is where,
Hmm.
that the fold in the thumb and the way that it actually wraps in that area.
Yeah, it
I
almost
would,
looks uncomfortable to me.
yeah, I don't know if I'd want to wear it for long periods of time, but
But again, this is more to I don't know if this is to try to avoid the carpal tunnel or if this is to try to support your wrist once you've got carpal tunnel symptoms, or
oh, they suggest putting it on before you go to sleep.
so you're stretching it while you sleep. There you go.
Yeah, yeah, kind of makes it nice and easy. I wish I could exercise in my sleep. I would.
Yeah. But yeah,
So,
I've been lucky as far as that goes. We're avoiding it for the most parts. Any kinds of damage. There are times where I've seen, what happens if you try to do too much, and I knew to step back and just relax a little bit and reapproach what I was doing.
see, as they say, like, if you already are dealing with it, it, it it's not like it's something that's irreversible in most cases. Some of those ones we were looking at, yeah, there's some that are more serious than others, and tinnitus is not one that you want to discover you have because it's not going to likely be reversible. The best you can do at that point is not make it worse.
Hmm.
But like there's suggestions of doing these things if you are dealing with it can help to kind of alleviate it, or in some cases put it into remission.
And in a lot of these, like you said before, it's very important to do the exercises not to try to max out, so to speak. Like you're not trying to like max out the reps to try to strengthen up. You're trying to do very gentle exercise to work your way through it and to, strengthen while also just fortifying really the motions that you're doing, reinforcing the fact that your hands can do these motions.
Yeah,
It's
and
important.
hope that you never like surgery when it comes to this stuff. There's not a lot out there, and if you are going the surgery route, it's likely something very serious at that point.
Hmm. And that's where a lot of times, again, it comes down to whether it's ergonomics and a good strength regimen and just being conscious and aware of which things you're doing that are causing you problems that you can then, stop doing and, figure out better ways to do and figure out which things are helping as far as strengthening or, stretching or loosening or easing the pain and, figuring out how to get those things working.
Yeah, yeah. So if anybody's feeling like, they might be having some of these symptoms or they want to help to avoid it, mycarpaltunnel.com.
Hmm.
A lot of information here.
Good
Not
job finding
just
the
for
resource.
musicians,
Hmm.
but that was a worthy research to do.
Definitely. Okay, I see on the palm there, it shows the arrows of the ways that it's kind of stretching.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. The pad.
Hmm.
I
I didn't see that on the front side. Like I was only looking at the back, like, I wonder what that's trying to do. But it's basically trying to pull those. Makes sense.
Yeah, if that's cheap enough, I'll get me one of those and try it out. It might help with like the crampiness that I get sometimes when I'm trying to play.
Yeah. Again, just a proper technique or proper angle is very important with all the stuff that we're doing. So it's just find out what works for you, find out how to rearrange your space. Like again, this is not an ideal position for my keyboard for me, but it's not bad. It's not bad ergonomically, and I don't spend hours and hours here anyway. This is more set up so that I'm in a good place for the camera and can work with it here. But if I were sitting here to try to play for hours and hours, I would find a better position than this because this is just kind of sitting up on my on my drum set, just kind of rocking in the middle because this is the convenient spot. But
Yeah, and well, a dedicated space to jam. Like my music corner, it is set up to force me to sit upright, sit properly. My old studio back in Connecticut was horrible. Like I was leaning forward, the way I had my keyboard set up, it did not lend to creativity, it didn't lend to comfortability. Here, I force myself to. I got a music desk, it's at the perfect height, it is set for a bench. And if I do want to stand, I have a keyboard stand to the right with a keyboard. So
nice.
standing or sitting.
That's the way to do it. For me, like for keyboard, I would always want to be sitting. But at the same time, so many times it's a piano bench.
I tend to prefer to sit when I'm playing, especially if I'm writing, because it's like I'm trying to figure
Yeah,
something out.
yeah.
But there is something to be said about like the mood you're in. When I am standing, it
Hmm.
does feel like jamming, and I attack very
Hmm.
differently
Yeah,
at the keyboard stand.
it's true. It's true. I mean, especially, I mean, even with guitar and with bass, I mean, I find myself, whether it's just kind of rocking back and forth differently, whether I'm sitting or, can't bounce my foot the same way as I do when I'm bounce my head more, that kind of thing. There are
Well,
definitely
a
different
guitar
nuances.
a guitarist is going to have a different mood if he's sitting there
Hmm.
playing the guitar on his lap versus if he's standing up and
And getting into the pose, yep.
yeah.
Got to get that rock star pose happening. Vocalists as well. I mean, we talked about that before too, being in a good position for singing. Where if you're sitting, you can only sing certain ways. Where if you were standing with yourself very upright and singing up into the room, like you'll get a whole different sound
Yes.
than you would if
Yeah,
you were
you get a
sitting.
whole different projection.
Hmm.
I really, when I see vocalists compressing, folding
Yeah.
themselves and singing down and things like that, none of that lends to projection or to the sound.
Hmm.
And sometimes they'll argue like, "Oh, well, it sounds fine to me. I sing
And I do it all the
fine."
time. Yeah.
And I'm not arguing against it. I'm just saying none of it lends to the projection and the
Not saying
capture
not
that
saying
you
you
could
can't do
get.
it that way, but it's more that you should. Like if you tried doing it this way, you might find that it's actually better if you do it this way than when you do it that way. But you won't know unless you try it.
And I tend to hear tension in a voice
Hmm.
in places where you might not hear it while you're singing. You might not hear that your throat is folded or that you're not wide open in your sound, but I will
Hmm.
if I'm
It'll come through.
listening to
Yeah.
it.
Yep. It'll come through for sure. And that's one of those things. Ergonomics very important, and sitting position, all of that.
And that's why it's good to listen to yourself afterwards. You
Hmm.
know,
Hmm.
Is if you recognize that your voice isn't booming as much as it should,
Hmm.
consider how you're placing yourself. And there's a reason why the studios make you sing up and the mics in front of them like this, and
Hmm.
and they're
At their
opening.
full height, yeah. They're standing at full height, and you got their you know, windpipe is open to the fullest, vertical that they can get, and just you get a really good tone out of it that way. And this one thing that like people are testing a microphone in a like let's say an auditorium. They have somebody giving a speech or whatever, and somebody's like hello, hello, blah, 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 blah," and they're talking really quiet, and they're a foot away from the microphones. There's no technique involved, and I could sit there, I could turn the mic off and sit back there, and without actually straining myself at all, I could speak to the person in the very back row, and they would hear every single word I'm saying
Well,
because
especially
I
with
can
your
project.
voice.
I mean, my voice does project on its own, but I also know how to project it so that I could literally fill a hall with my voice
Yeah.
without a lot of extra effort. I don't do it when I'm here because I'm in an apartment and I don't want my voice escaping big. But if I need to, I know how to project it, and it's
and
important, like
and
knowing how to
and
make that happen.
projection isn't just about volume.
Exactly.
That's something in a future episode
Hmm.
we'll explore more on. What makes a singer project.
Yeah.
That'll make for an interesting topic.
And a good example of that, we can do some tests even with a microphone where I could take my phone, for example, set it up like as if I was filming a band playing, and step far back and basically just speak at a normal volume and then speak with a more forceful volume. And this is projecting, and you'll hear a difference from across the room
and
for
and
sure.
and, and see how the recording at a distance, how projection can change that recording even though you don't change your distance
Or I mean, the volume would
or
change
the
in that case.
volume.
I am kind of going more. I'm going louder if I'm projecting more, but it's not all about volume. It's not just amplifying the volume. It's about the intensity of what you're putting out there. Speaking with clear diction, making sure you're speaking clearly when you're trying to speak very loudly, so that so that it's all coming through the way it needs to, because the volume
or
can
or or
overshadow some of that.
the
Hmm.
swell in and the swell out of the
Hmm.
volume.
Yep,
Yeah.
all of that stuff.
Chris was saying Segovia is rumored to have put in over 100,000 hours of practice in his life. I'm not surprised, man.
Well,
He
if
is
you take that,
one of the best guitarists ever.
If you take that math that you just had up there a minute ago, that would average out to 4 hours a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year for 68
And
years.
hey, his ass was old, and he was playing that whole
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. Well, like when they were asking, somebody was asking Jocko Pastorius, like how much, how much time do you practice each week? And he's like, practice? Shit, I'm playing 10 hours a day. Like he had, he was gigging 10 hours a day. Like there's no time to practice. There's no time to not be on stage basically at that point. But, all those hours, factor in also to those, the hours performing count as hours of practice if you're actually performing, doing your stuff. All those hours count.
Yeah, it's a question of practice can be exercise, or it can be practicing a particular, technique.
Now, on that note of what to practice and things that are good to practice, I showed you guys the one exercise I was doing on guitar where it's like 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 4. Like you just kind of a very repetitive exercise where you're just going through the motions of things, but you're getting different transitions under your fingers, like a 1 2 4 or a 1 3 4 or a 1 2 3 4, all those different things. Same thing on piano. Another thing that we do on with the scales, if we were doing a C major scale, if you were doing like 3-ups, it would be basically you go 3 notes up and then back one. So you go, doing it like that. Let me bring up the ridiculous actually, so you can see what we're doing, but you get an idea of what's going on there.
1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3. Is that?
Yep. Just basically doing, in that case, and the fingering isn't as important in this case, but I'm just doing 1 2 3 2 3 4 3 4 5. And the idea is just to get familiar with how that sounds and familiar with those movements. Same thing you do 4 in a row then. And you want them to get smoother and smoother as you're going and be able to do them in different keys. Where on the guitar, it's again, once you have that pattern down, it doesn't change. Whether you're doing it in E flat or G flat or E or whatever, it's all the same. On the piano, it's going to change because you have the different sharps and flats. So that's where.
Isn't that kind of also practicing timing changes? Because like 3/4 versus 4/4 versus 5/4, or the weird ones, doing that can help you to play in slightly different times.
Yeah, in this case, that was triplets
Because
on the first one.
a 1 2 3 is much different than a 1 2 3 4.
Exactly, and that's why that first set was 1 2 3s, and the second set's 4s. And in both cases, it's just going through those a bunch of times, and again, that's the key of C, so it's very easy. If you're doing it in the key of A. Then you do have to worry about the fingering.
Oh, you're doing it in A major.
Yeah.
Ballsy.
Yeah. So that's the thing is you have to worry about that. Was the idea is to make sure that you can figure out, okay, you got the 3 sharps, you got to deal with those. And then that one's like, starting on the second finger. And then it's like, how do you get up to that one? So it's like I would have to go second finger, like index, thumb, so changing the fingering around on that. And messing up the whole way through. But
I'm really trying to be more aware of which finger is doing what these days. Since you got me moving from my thumb to my pointy to start my scales,
Nice.
Now I'm like, which finger should I be using?
Now, one of my favorites is chromatic runs where you're only using these 3. You're only using the thumb, the index, and the middle. And the idea being that you're just going to always want to go thumb, index, and you're only going to throw the middle in if you need to, like going from the E and the F, right? So thumb, index, thumb, index, middle on the F sharp, thumb, index, middle on the C sharp, thumb, index, middle on the F sharp.
Oh, and that's really just a 3-finger salute, huh?
Yep, and that's why in this middle section here, it's just basically you're just doing the thumb and the index. So that's just those 2 fingers doing that whole rocking back and forth, and you're only getting the middle finger involved when you can't, like when you're going to mess up because you're going to hit another white note.
When you can't jump the thumb.
And then that's where you go. The index does that second white note, and then the middle does the black note, and then the thumb scoots under and just keeps going with thumb, index. And once you get that down, I mean, you can hear that I like pause a little bit when I get to that spot because I haven't done this in a long time, but. They're the kind of things that, like, once you get that down, you can go up and down with little chromatic runs like that in the middle of whatever else you're doing. So you can just throw something like that in the middle there, And it makes it sound fancier than what you might have been doing otherwise, because it's chromatic. So there's notes there that weren't in the scale or the pentatonic that you were working in.
That's how Jeff Beck like just rolls up and down with the electric piano on some of your jams, huh?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
He's just like back and forth.
Not only that, but if we were playing a jam in C, he might be doing rolling up and down in G major. And that's got that F sharp in there, which sounds different against a C. Or he might be doing it in F with a B flat. Because they're both very closely related to C.
He's using the fifth.
That's basically
Yep.
borrowing from the scales that are right nearby. And that's not a specific example of something that he might do. He might do things even crazier, pulling things. Oh, we'll do this half diminished, whatever, secondary dominant to whatever.
Oh.
Just to, it's like, oh, okay.
The son of a bitch can play Hungarian reggae. He can play anything.
You play whatever you like, and I'm gonna enjoy it for sure. But yeah, as far as analysis, as far as figuring out exactly what he's doing, I spend a lot of time trying to figure out sometimes. But like with Oliver Prane, the other one that we were going to deal with, the hand model, right?
The hand guy, yeah.
For him, and the way he was going with some of those, where he was just in the modal stuff he was doing, he just kept shifting more down the line. So he's playing in C, and then he goes into G, and then he goes into D, but he's still technically playing in C. He's just borrowing from G and from D and adding more spice by getting extra stuff in there. One thing I was noticing the other day, like if you look at C major and you look at a C major 7, right? And then that note's just stuck. Where is he? Down.
An asshole.
Asshole. Those 4. So C major 7 is those 4. Now that's the 1, 3, 5, and 7, and they're evenly spaced, and you can see on the staff that they look really nicely, well behaved. Just if they're on lines, they're all on the lines. If they're on the spaces, they're all on the spaces. They're just nicely stacked, right? So stacked thirds, we call that. But this is the 1, 3, 5, and 7. Now, the extensions that we talk about usually are the 9, 11, and 13. Those are just continuing stacking. So they'll call that a C13 because now you got the 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, and 13. But if you just look at the 9, 11, and 13, that's a D minor chord.
Mm-hmm.
So if you take the C major 7, then all of the extensions are all part of the D minor, which is the 2 chord normally of C major. So anytime you have a C major or any kind of a major 7, you can get to all of the extensions by going one whole step up and using a minor, and those are now all the extensions, the 9, the 11, and the 13.
Basically playing a triad there.
Yeah. And then with all of those, you could do, that's the regular 13, that's the flat 13, this is the regular 11, that's the sharp 11, that's the regular 9, the sharp 9, the flat 9, they're all right there. So you can find all of those extensions right nearby. But that's one of those things that we would probably have to get a little bit deeper into theory to really get involved with all of that. But it was just one of those things that jumped out at me, that when we're stacking thirds like that and you see them on the staff, those next 3 they look the same. I mean, it's just all stacking beautifully. You did the same thing in D minor.
It's actually easier to see on a keyboard than it would be on a guitar.
Exactly. On a guitar, that would be an ugly thing. We're trying to is this claw versus that claw. It doesn't tell you as much. Right, exactly.
It's just a claw.
But in this case, you can actually see the relationship between all the notes. And on the keys, you can just see that it's every other white note.
Oh, and on the staff, like, now that I'm actually paying attention to the staff, thanks to Meticulous, like, you can see the whole pattern.
And you can see it changing the name of the chord as we go. C, and then we have the C third because it's just the 2 notes. Then we have the C major triad, so it's just C. C major 7 because we added the 7. C9 because we added the 9. C11 because we added the 11. C13 because we added the 13. Now,
It's awesome how it recognizes that on the fly.
Oh yeah, and if we just did root 3 and 7, they'll still call that a major 7. This is what we were talking about before with the shell chords.
Yeah, the shell chords from last week.
Yep, root 3 9, you get an add 9. Root 3 11 they'll call that an F major 7 over C because it's kind of spread out. The A would be the 13, they'll call that A minor over C. But if they wanted to call it the full chord, they would probably want the 7 in there as well. So root 3 7 11, they'll call that a major 7 11. Root 3 7 13, they'll call it a major 7 13. And again, if you put them all in, they'll just keep the name simple.
Man, I never thought I'd even be playing 13ths.
Exactly. But then it turns out, it's just the 6. And anyway, if you're playing in C major, you love the 13 because that's your A. Like your A minor, you love that one.
I just didn't know I loved it.
Didn't know why you loved it, but now you do. And And the electric piano sounds not too bad. This one's not super sharp. It's kind of a mellow electric piano. The second one's got that sharpness to it. A little bit more percussive. Not quite harpsichord or clavie.
Yeah.
That's the clavie. There's a bunch of good options. Vibes and marimba, always nice. Marimba. Always fun. And then tubular bells, because it's that time of year.
It's Christmas time.
Yep. Speaking of which,
speaking of, Ange has a challenge out there for songs for our soldiers for Christmas.
nice.
If you check out her, I don't know if it's her pin post. Did she pin it?
I
But
think
it
she did, but I'm not
should
sure.
be right at the top.
Songs for soldiers for Christmas. Now, I'm going to probably have to break out the song that we made 2 years ago. We made an original over at Joey's. And we thought it was going to be a one-time thing because, COVID was just kicking off. So we made a song called Santa's Got a Mask On. And we figured, we're going to always know that it was from this year because this is the year where everyone's wearing masks. Yeah, but then there was another year of it, and there's another year of it. So
Santa still has a mask.
Santa still has that goddamn mask on. So we'll probably break that one out. Maybe not tonight, but maybe next week. We're getting closer towards the Christmas thing. I hate when people start the Christmas stuff too soon. So I know it's December already, but maybe next week we'll break that out. Santa's got a mask on.
At this point, you can legit come out with your Christmas songs.
Yep. It's after Thanksgiving. It's allowed, no laws against it. People can bitch, but it's like, hey, it's after Thanksgiving. My hands are tied, man.
Hey, I had
You're in the
people
window.
asking me to write Christmas songs back in August. So.
Yeah. And it's like, no, not before Halloween. That's straight out. Like, that's already a whole month early already. Can't be doing that. It's crazy
Well,
talk.
Christmas in summer.
One thing that I got going on over here that is something that was kind of new, that was kind of neat. I don't remember if we talked much about the little light that I use sometimes for gigs. Like basically this is like a cheesy Home Depot light fixture, like work light.
Oh, yeah. I've
That's
got
it.
a couple of those. Yeah, my dad used to construction lights.
Yep, construction light with the little clamp on the
Very
end
useful.
there. But the bulb that's in it is one of the GE smart bulbs that can change color. But I did a firmware update at a gig the other day, and they've now built in like party light options into the light itself. So like
And
it's
you
been
can
doing a light
control
show
it from the phone.
from the phone, yeah. So like when I go in here, I don't know how well you'll be able to see that, but like there's 4 different options for like in the app of which ones, like this is Aurora that's on right now. But then you got Happy Holidays would just be red and green. So like we got the red and the green kind of flashing back there. We've got the red, white, and blue. So if it was 4th of July, we'd have like going back and forth between red, white, and blue just on its own. And they got Vegas. It's trying to do all kinds of crazy shit, of course, because hey Vegas, baby.
You got to get green if you want to be approved by Ange.
That's right. And then they got one that's just called Party Time. And I guess that's just going to do all kinds of whatever it wants to do. But I was just amazed that like, I'm sitting there at a gig and I know that, I was laughing about the fact that, this thing to run my little cheesy light wants 2-factor ID. And I'm like, you're going to send me an email every time you want to launch my, like someone's going to hijack my light and make it blue instead of red. Like, oh no, like what are they going to do?
I'm going to
with
drive
my light
him
bulb?
crazy. I'm going to hack your light.
And then the ones that would drive people crazy is like candle, because candle is one where it's like basically it's going to like flicker as if it was like a flame or a candle, like or like at a fireplace going or whatever. But somebody would probably just think that the light's broken because it's like it gets a little brighter and a little dimmer, a little brighter, a little dimmer. Then you got volcanic where it's going to go back and forth between like orange and red and all that. But I was just like really impressed that they added all this and like to make it all, I launched the app. It does the 2-factor thing fine. I'm at the wedding. It's like, oh, I see that you got a bulb there, but it wants to do a firmware update. I'm like, fine, whatever, do it. It does the firmware update remotely, and all of a sudden, all these new options are there. I'm just like, oh, hello.
Sometimes it's nice to update.
I was like, yeah, that's why I'm an early adopter. It's like, all right, I will check it out, and I will click on everything too. It's like, oh, what's this do? What's that do? Like, let's find out.
Well, who
'Cause
would
it's
have
fun.
who would have thunk it that like our bulbs have firmware updates these
Right,
days? What's
right.
going on?
And then I can control it all from my phone. So I can just, be sitting there and I can have that across the room or pointing up at like the, the band banner that they have, for the band, the band name or whatever. And I can just sit there and control it, as I'm controlling the rest of my light show. I can just tap on my phone and change this or that. I just thought it was neat that like it was just this little app in the phone that lets you, jump in and change these little effects. In addition to just picking, if you wanted to just pick from a color wheel, I mean, you can just go into, whatever color you want. Like they just give you a regular, color wheel with temperature and,
Sweet.
and you can just pick whatever color you want and, say, oh, I want it to be that blue over there and then that's too dark. I want it to go, 10% brightness or 100% brightness or lighter like that or make it green because Ange likes green. So we'll do bright green like that.
I do see some green.
Yep. And that's the thing is like I also have this white one in front of me, so that's kind of dimming it out a little bit or overpowering it. But like if I pick red, it's like, whoa, it's like that's really red.
It's like that Seinfeld episode where the Kenny Rogers chicken
The roasters
across from Kramer's house and be like, hey, I'm going nuts.
I'm losing it, Jerry. But blue, everything's nice and blue. And again, you can change the intensity, bring it down to like, 5% or whatever. It's just fun. Like being able to have things like that in addition to what I normally had going on with my light show. It's just kind of neat that, stuff like that was like an added bonus, like something I already had that they made new features for. They're like, here, we saw that you like this, so here, make it better, make it more useful for you. It's like, well, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Hey, you couldn't get lights that did this 20 years ago without spending thousands of dollars.
Yeah. And those spots back then, those gel pars or whatever. I mean, those things would get hot as hell. They would melt. I mean,
you'd have to replace them constantly.
You got to treat them real careful and all that. Yeah. I mean, but I mean, Mike and I were just talking about this one at that gig. Like I was, he was talking about how much he loves that little light because it's just, you just clamp it wherever. So like where he has his board, the rack mount board, I can just take that clamp and just clamp it onto the handle. And the light is either blowing up on the wall as like an accent light or blowing down in our area and just giving us a little, little zone for us to do. And I usually keep it blue or red. So it's something that's, darker, but has some light to it.
Makes you
lets
look
us see
like
what
a
we're
DJ.
doing. Makes us look like a DJ. And then again, with my phone, I just be like, oh, now it's yellow. Beep. Now it's green. Beep. And just do little changes in throughout. Percussive organ. Good for the baseball game. Or the hockey game.
Well, we're rounding around the 10:30 area.
Yes.
This would be a good time to rock it if you need to. Want to slap up a video?
Sounds like a plan. Let's do this one. I have one here for the Circle of Fifths for songwriting. Let me get it sharing in the first place and make sure I've got it set for the right place. You don't hear that right now, right?
Nope.
Excellent. So let's get that to theater mode. I like to do theater mode instead of full screen so that we can still see the page or the page name of whose page it is. So let's do this way. Just going to do it as a tab for us, and this is again from Mike George is the YouTube page. And
They play a lot nicer with your tabs.
oh yeah, they do indeed, because they know I'm not messing around.
They take you serious.
Yes. So this is a 14-minute video. So I'm going to kick it off. I'm going to get some coffee here, and everybody feel free to stretch. Remember, it's important to stretch. Don't get yourself carpal tunnel or any of that. So shake it out, stretch, walk around, get some coffee. And this is Circle of Fifths for songwriting from Mike George.
The Circle of Fifths is a really useful tool you can use to write songs. Though most people don't understand this, they assume the Circle of Fifths is complicated, which it's not, or they imagine it's just a useless diagram of key signatures with no practical application to songwriting, which is too bad because the Circle of Fifths is so much more than that, as a super powerful aid that can actually guide you in the songwriting process to come up with some especially cool chord progressions. So in this video, we'll look at how the Circle of Fifths organizes chords into special groups to form chord progressions, and you'll see how to use modes to create unexpected sounds that expand your palette as a songwriter. All right, so to begin, begin, you should know that the circle of fifths is not some complicated, difficult thing. And while most people picture it as a ring of key signatures like this, to see how the various keys in music have different numbers of sharp notes or flat notes, what the circle of fifths really shows is how all of the scales in music overlap to form one big loop where all keys are connected or related. For example, if you start on the C major scale, the second half of this pattern, starting on the fifth note, forms the first half of the next scale, G major. And then starting on G's fifth note, D, that leads to the first half of the next scale, D major, and so on, where each respective scale overlaps with the next to make one big daisy chain pattern called the circle of fifths. This is really what the circle of fifths is, a pattern that shows how all the keys in music are connected, which we can see more clearly by adding colors of the color wheel, where, for example, G, red-orange, is equal parts C, red, and D, orange, and where D, orange, is connected to G, red-orange, and A, orange-yellow, and so on, in the same consistent way all around the circle. Now, what's cool is that the same connections between these keys also applies to all of the chords in those keys. For example, instead of picturing the circle of fifths as scales, and you see it as a ring of chords, it looks like this, where all neighboring chords are related, like C, F, and G, and G, C, and D, and D, G, and A, all around the circle. This is the circle of fifths using major chords, which you can use to make simple chord progressions. But to add more options, we can also include all of the minor chords like this, with each minor chord aligned with its relative major, and also a ring of diminished chords around the edge like this, to form groups where the chords in every key are grouped, so you know which ones go together in a given key, which harmonies are compatible and work well together in a song. For example, in the key of C, we have these 7 chords: C major, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor, B diminished, and back to C. Or chords major 1, minor 2, minor 3, major 4, major 5, minor 6, diminished 7, and again 1 in this key. Or in the key of G, the chords are G major, A minor, B minor, C major, D major, E minor, F sharp diminished, and G. Or again chords major 1, minor 2, minor 3, major 4, major 5, minor 6, diminished 7, and 1 again. And likewise, the 7 chords in every key form the same pattern, the same grouping anywhere in the circle of fifths. So we can use this pattern, this diagram of chord relationships, almost like a painter's palette, to select chords that go together that are harmonically related to create good chord progressions. Like in the key of C, for example, you can easily pick out the chords in the song Can't Help Falling in Love, since they come from the same key in this grouping right here.
Wise men say only fools rush in, but I can't help falling in love with you.
Without the circle of fifths, it's not as clear why these particular chords are used in this song: C, E minor, A minor, F, and G. On their own, laid out like this, the relationships between these chords, the connections between them, aren't obvious. It almost seems like they're just randomly thrown together and happen to sound good in sequence. But in the circle of fifths, you can now see these chords in context as major and minor harmonies that are grouped together into a single key. In this example, the key of C, which is why they sound compatible, where the progression of this song is specifically major 1, minor 3, minor 6, major 4, major 1, major 5, 4, 5, 6, 4, 1, 5, 1. And because all keys in the circle of fifths are symmetrical, meaning they form the same consistent patterns, we can rotate this diagram to play this progression in any key. Like in the key of D, for example, which is how Elvis originally recorded the song.
Wise men say only fools rush in, but I can't help falling in love with you.
This is the same pattern, the exact same progression of major and minor chords, but shifted into a new key. So the circle of fifths is helpful because it shows all of the chords in context. That is, not only how to play each chord on the instrument, but also how they're all related to each other in any key in music, which guides you in the process of creating cool chord progressions. But what's really nice is that it also shows you more than just how to transpose songs into different keys. The circle of fifths also allows you to play a progression in any mode. But what does that mean? In music, modes are just permutations of the major scale. So if we take the C major scale, for example, play the same pattern, beginning and ending on each respective note to form different derivative patterns or permutations, we get 7 different modes. The major scale itself, also known as the Ionian mode, the Dorian mode, which starts on the second note of the source scale, in this example, D Dorian, the Phrygian mode starting on scale degree 3, or E Phrygian here, the Lydian mode, F Lydian in our example, Mixolydian on the 5th scale degree, G Mixolydian, the Aeolian mode or relative minor, like this A Aeolian, and the Locrian mode, like this B Locrian pattern. Each mode uses the same set of notes, all derived from a shared source scale, but they all sound unique since each has a different interval pattern, a different sequence of whole step and half step intervals based on where it begins and ends. This is what modes are. They're just permutations of the major scale, each with a different sound or vibe, and where each mode establishes a different note as its home base, or what musicians call a tonic. So in our example here, the tonic of C Ionian is C, the tonic or home base of D Dorian is D, the tonic of E Phrygian is E, and so on for each separate mode. So what does this have to do with using the circle of fifths for songwriting? What is the practical application of all of this? Check this out. If we take this table of modes, again with our example being various modes of the C major scale, and instead of looking at the individual notes of each mode, we swap those out for the chords that are built on those notes, it looks like this, where each set of chords played in sequence sounds like its underlying mode, but fleshed out. So while C Ionian sounds like this, when played as chords, it sounds like this. And while the D Dorian mode sounds like this, this is that same pattern in chord form. And the same applies to all of the other modes, where the chords in each one simply accentuate or give harmonic form to the underlying note pattern of that mode. And what's cool is that just as the various modes share the same set of notes and are just permutations of a common source scale, the same is true for the chords in each mode. In other words, all of the chords in our example, whether they're in the Ionian mode or Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, or Locrian, it's all just the same group of chords: C major, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor, and B diminished, but with each of these chords serving as the tonic or tonal home base of its respective mode, which we can look at another way using the circle of fifths. In the key of C grouping within this diagram, we have the C Ionian mode, which begins and ends on C major. But within this same grouping, packed within this same space, are all of the other modes derived from the C major scale, including D Dorian, E Phrygian, F Lydian, G Mixolydian, A Aeolian, and B Locrian. So what this means is that each grouping of chords in the circle of fifths contains not only the chords of each major key, which again is the common name for the Ionian mode, but also all of the chords for every mode that is a permutation of that major key. So anywhere you go in the circle of fifths, depending on which chord serves as the tonic, you can play chord progressions in any key and mode. It's beautiful. And in every grouping, the tonic of a mode is in the same position. The tonic chord of Ionian is always at the bottom center, Dorian is middle left, Phrygian is middle right, Lydian is bottom left, Mixolydian bottom right, Aeolian middle center, and Locrian top center. Anywhere in the circle of fifths, no matter where you rotate this grouping, these positions are consistent and the patterns are predictable. And these relationships between chords allow you to experiment with different chord progressions. For example, let's take the popular Pachelbel progression in the key of D, or more technically D Ionian, which is made from chords 1, 5, 6, 3, 4, 1, 4, 5. This progression centers around the major 1 chord and sounds great because all of these harmonies form a compatible set. They come from the same key and mode. And if we move to any other key, any other Ionian mode, like this key of C for example, where the major 1 chord now becomes C major, we can play this same progression and it sounds just as good, only using a different set of chords. And we could rotate to any of the other keys in the same way to play the same progression in any of the other Ionian modes, and it will sound identical, only shifted to a different key, which is cool. The circle of fifths is useful in this way because it provides an easy way to transpose a song into any key. But because this diagram also includes all of the other modes in every key, we can also get more creative by morphing this progression, or any progression, into a different mode, and the results are more interesting. For example, if we take this Pachelbel progression back to its original position of being played in D Ionian with D major as the tonic, it again sounds like this. But while this pattern sounds great in the Ionian mode, that is played in a major key with D major or the major 1 as its tonal home base, we could instead play this progression in another mode of D, like D Aeolian or the minor key of D, where the D minor chord becomes the 1, in this case a minor 1. The chord pattern evolves to sound like this. This pattern sounds familiar because it's sort of like the classic Pachelbel progression in the Ionian mode, but played in the Aeolian mode, in this example D Aeolian, which is a permutation of F major. It's morphed into something new, something unexpected with a more haunting or melancholy sound. Actually, it's mostly Aeolian, but with a major 5 chord, A major in this case, borrowed from over here to give it a more solid feel. Since the minor 5 chord isn't as strong, it's not as harmonically satisfying because it doesn't lead back to the minor 1 chord as well, as I explain in other videos. But you can see and hear with this example how the circle of fifths provides all sorts of options for creating and tweaking chord progressions to create any kind of sound you want. By playing with different keys and the various modes within each key, you can come up with a nearly endless number of song ideas, all using the circle of fifths, experimenting with different keys and modes, morphing progressions to hear how they sound and how they change and evolve to create the music you want to make. Anyway, the circle of fifths is such a powerful tool, and it's much more useful for songwriting than I think most people realize. So hopefully this was helpful. Please let the algorithm know if you liked it. And there's a PDF in the community with all of these diagrams if you want to check it out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.
Oh, I did like it. And it really clicked in when he started using Pachelbel as the example. I loved seeing the circles with that grid, the way he has it. It just so clearly shows the mode relations and how it's all related.
Exactly. And that was the thing, is a lot of people, they see the circle of fifths and they think, okay, yeah, I mean, I can remember what order things are in, no big deal, but they don't realize how much information there really is in there, because there's so much more to it.
When you see it in rotation, when you see it in action that way, when he did the little variation with the Aeolian, like he gave it like a Western flavor.
Yeah, and that, you know, haunting was the word I was looking for. Yeah, like that little bit of a hauntingness to it, with it being in a minor key instead of a major key. Very cool. And borrowing that 5, there's a good reason for that too, because borrowing the 5 from the major instead of using that minor 5, because the minor 5 doesn't sound as satisfying, like you said. The major 5 sounds a little weird, but it is a more solid footing to put it on.
No, in that particular case, it gave it that little bit of hauntingness.
Nice. So that was for songwriting, and that's one of those things where, again, when it comes to progressions and all of that, whether it's just rolling dice to come up with random progressions, or whether it's, you know, starting with a key that you decide, okay, this song is going to be in E, or this song is going to be in G, like, depends on how you want to start that. Like, you know, some people, they have a strong idea of what they want to play in at the beginning. On keyboard, a lot of times it comes down to what's an easier scale to play when it comes to sharps and flats. For the guitar and the bass, it's really not as much about that. It's more about where you want to sit if you're playing in F, you might be playing too low, or if you're playing in A or D, you might be playing too high. You know, there's different sonic ranges that you'd want to be in, but other than that, it doesn't really matter whether you're playing in, you know, C or F or G. You can play whatever key you want to play in, and just try it in different keys and see what it sounds like is the best idea to me, because it will sound different with different character, like that Pachelbel example. It sounds different in different key, but
Feel it out.
yeah.
What'd you say his name was? I want to make sure
That
he's
was
on our YouTube.
Mike George,
Mike George.
coming up on 30,000 subscribers. And I just recently found him actually for this one. This was one, again, I do so much of my YouTube stuff is music stuff that my feed just fills with even people that I've never seen before, but relevant videos. And when I see ones like this, that, you know, it's just, the layout was great. I liked the presentation. I liked the fact that it, like you said, the different examples, the showing it and hearing it at the same time. All of that stuff to me is you know, he gets an A on that one. You know, it's a good video in terms of, you know, production, the information, all of it.
Yep, and you can find him on YouTube, George360.
Mike George 360 said.
Yeah, he's now in our he's now
Nice.
in our subscribe list.
We got him. Excellent.
Oh, his charts, that Circle of Fifth charts, that's the best one yet.
Yep. Again,
Click-
and I've seen a
click
lot
it.
of different Circle of Fifths, and again, some have more information than others. Some show you a little bit better than others, but just that little shape that he had in there really just locks it in. Where you
That
take that
helped-
shape and just roll that around, and that's exactly what you need to know.
Yeah, that three-layered approach there helped me to really see the modal relations.
Oh yeah. Not only that, but the bottom layer was the 1, 4, 5, all major. That next ring out is all minor, 2, 3, and 6, and the next ring out is the diminished 7. So like towards the center, you got the one in the center, and then the 4 and the 5 are on the two sides, and then the next one up is going to be, you know, you got the 2, 3, and the 6 there. So I'm thinking it's the 6, the 2, and the 3, because they're all relative to the keys that are underneath. So like the C, the relative major, or the relative minor of C major is A. So this one's going to be C, then that 6 is going to be right above it because that's the relative minor. In the same way, if G was the 1, then the 6 of G would be up there.
See, it's so great that nowadays instructors can make charts and graphs like this. I wish I had these resources when I was first starting.
Yep. Oh, you were going to check on, for our YouTube subscriptions, who do we have in there? We were looking for Jake to make sure that we had him.
Oh,
So I don't
yeah.
remember if we specifically added him during one of our episodes, but I know we've shown lots of his videos, so he should definitely be out. He should definitely be on there. We just started doing the subscription or the subscribing from that channel just recently, so
No,
trying
I
to
don't
make sure
see
we got
Jake in there.
okay. He is on. It's not under Jake, but it is.
It's not Signals, right? Signals is
I think that was the Glenn the Sound guy. Actually, let me check. Signals might be right.
no, Glenn's the angry one, right?
Glenn's the angry one, yeah.
Yeah,
No, you're right.
like
Signals
him.
is correct. Signals is Jake. You're at it.
Oh, that is Jake.
Excellent. Wanted to make sure we had that.
We got you, Jake.
And Nare Soul, there was another one we did the other day, right? I'm pretty sure we got her.
Oh yeah, she's in there. Piano Groove, Godfrey Guitar, Q Jam Tracks, Sunset Architect. That's the one we added last week.
That's right. Yep.
Now, I do have a guitarist. One thing I was also looking at in the last week that very interesting. SR kind of nudged me in this direction. Have you ever heard of impulse response?
Nope.
Apparently, this is a new technique to simulate like amp and cab simulations. You know how like we have all these cab and amp simulations for guitar these days, so you can load up all these different effects and sound like a Marshall stack, or impulse response approach. It's almost like it reverse engineers an effect based on a sample of the effect itself. And with the right programs, like Neural DSP is one of them that
Right.
allows you to import these IR files. And when you do, they simulate the effects the same way like a cab or an amp simulator would.
Sure.
It intrigued me when I heard about this process. I mean, I'm still on the fence as to whether this can really do like what some claim, because you know SR was like saying, oh, but you can, and I was kind of like the doubting Thomas, like, wait a minute, you're telling me that all you got to do is sample the effect and it reproduces it, reverse engineers it. Apparently, in some cases, it can.
Nice.
And I was looking around for a video that would compare, you know, this technique to cab simulators and amp simulators. I haven't had a chance to watch this one either, but I put it in the chat. If you, yeah, it's
This one?
and this is a guitar, so he definitely looks like a YouTube channel that this stuff that I'm gonna want to subscribe to.
Nice. So let's check out IRs versus cab sims. What's the difference? From JT Guitar.
Yeah, JT Guitar.
Hello and welcome to JT Guitar. I thought that today I'd do a quick video just explaining the difference between IRs, also known as impulse responses, and cabinet simulation. What I'm using today is the STL Tonality Howard Benson suite, and this is my favorite amp setting. I've saved this. It's a preset I've called JT 2021 Heavy, spelled with 2 V's, because it's just that damn heavy. And it sounds like this. Well, you just heard it a second ago, but I'll play it again. Played it wrong that time though, so I'll play it again. I'll leave that one because I got the pinch harmonic. And now that is using, at the moment, if we go to the cab section of this, this is using cab simulation. Now the difference between cab simulation and an impulse response is that with cab simulation you can change the mic positioning. And depending on what cab simulation software you're using, you can do other things like change the sound of the room you're in, change the microphone. Because this is kind of aimed at beginners, the STL Tonality is a super simple one. And all you can do on this one, as far as I can work out, and I've only been looking at it for a few seconds, is it's got an SM57 here, or an SM57 copy, this microphone, and you can move it. So this is how it sounds at the moment. But if I wanted to move the microphone more to the outside of the speaker, it would sound like this. Darker. And then if I wanted it more in the center of the cone, it's going to sound much brighter. That's very kind of 80s thrash sounding, I think. And now you can also move further away from the speaker. So I'm going to put it back on the edge of the cone here. That's quite a popular place, the edge of that inner ring of the cone. Now you can also pull it further away from the cabinet or from the speaker. A little bit harder to hear the difference, but it should be more airy. If we go closer, we'll get proximity effect, which will make it sound lower or deeper. Maybe if I do some like actual palm mutes. And then if I go further away, that should sound a bit lighter or airier. But personally I like, well, when I'm recording a real amp, I basically go 1 inch away from the cone. I can't really tell on this how far that is away or not, but around here was... do like that harmonic. That's my sort of favourite spot. Now, if you don't want to mess around with microphone placement, the danger is, I find, with microphone placement is there are probably more bad sounds than there are good sounds. Like, this is what a lot of people would call the sweet spot where I've got it at the moment. But, you know, if you don't know that, you might think, oh, put it right on the cone and that's going to sound very thin. And, you know, if you put it out here further away, you know, it's quite, you know, it's not horrible, but it's not that sort of beefy metal sound that we all sort of know and love. So if I push reset here, it will go back to where it was to start with, which is which, to be honest, now that I've heard all these other sounds, I've kind of gone off. That's the annoying thing. You've got like option paralysis, and your ear adjusts, and after a while you can like prefer something, and then you come back the next day and you go, oh, that sounds crap. What was I thinking? So that's cabinet simulation. It simulates all the versatility of having like a cabinet in front of you and the microphone and moving it around, but that also comes with the whole option paralysis thing and being indecisive and liking some sounds and not liking them later. What I'm going to do now is I've opened the STL Ignite Amps NAD IR. Now this is their IR loader. I'm just going to be using one side, but you can actually have 2 microphones at once, or two different speakers at once as well, although these are all vintage 30s. So what an IR is, an impulse response, is literally a sort of like a time capsule, if you like, of it's this power amp going into this cabinet, going to this microphone, going into this preamp, and what it does, it sends a full frequency sweep through that setup, so like a kind of whoop sort of sound, and then what that does is you've got a capture of how all those elements filter out those frequencies. So what you end up with is like an EQ that's exactly the same as the speaker, the microphone and the power amp are EQing your guitar's preamp signal. And it's sort of simpler to deal with because an IR, unless you've got loads of IRs, it's one sound. So let's have a listen to this IR. So this is a 412 cab with vintage 30s using a SM57 in the center of the speaker. God, there's some bad playing. It's my own song. I'll do a different bit. Now, you might say that sounds horrible, and maybe it does, but you can adjust things. You can adjust the amount of room, so I'm going to put a bit more room in. So that's essentially emulating having the speaker further away, but it's not really. It's going to affect, I don't know really what it's going to affect. It's going to make it sound like it's in a room. Not sure how they do it. It might be a very low reverb. Then you can adjust the resonance, which is kind of how woofy, if that makes any sense. If I turn this right up, that chug's got some sort of heft to it. I know these are all vague terms. And then if I turn it down, kind of softer. So, because this is quite shrill anyway, did I whistle with my teeth? Because this is shrill anyway, I did it again. I quite like the resonance a bit higher on this one. But you could also try off axis. So this is now. I reduce the resonance on that one. Sounds kind of honky. Now, what kind of sound you get from the impulse response depends on the quality of your impulse responses. But there's not a lot more to it than that. So cab simulation is very, very versatile. You can really shape the tone yourself, but you can run into option paralysis. Impulse responses are just a set sound, and you can do minor adjustments such as EQing or adjusting in this case, adjusting the resonance. But they're kind of simpler in that sense. And so some people might prefer impulse responses. But my advice would be to try them for free. Like this one, the NAD-IL, you can download this for free from STL Tones from their website. And it's very, very good. You might also be able to get it from Ignite Amp's website, but I'm not sure. So there you go. Just a quick explanation as to the differences between impulse responses and cab simulation. I hope it was helpful. If you found that helpful, feel free to like and subscribe. I've been JT, and I'll see you same time next week.
You get to subscribe from me for sure.
Yeah, and that IR technology does seem to have some usefulness. His option fatigue statement actually made a lot of sense to me because when it comes to those presets and guitar effects and VSTs these days, it's easy to get overwhelmed and never actually utilize the power of the preset the way that you want to, especially with guitar effects. You can get lost in all those cabs and simulations and never actually get to making music.
Yep. And that's the other thing that we talked about the other day even was simplifying the chain, like only having an effect in there if you really need it. And, you know, trying to do it with as few effects as you can. Like I was saying, one of the things I'll do in a BandLab track is I'll play bass on something, and the only thing I'll put on there is a BL1176 compressor, the built-in compressor that's just in there, just a little bit so that I can tweak, mainly to get the output to a level that I like, and so that if I played quietly or if I played anything that was too loud, it would basically tame anything that was too loud and bring up anything that was too low, just for a listen through. So I'll do that as an auditioning thing. I'll play through it and then I'll throw that effect on and then check it out. But I don't want to put a whole lot of effects on the chain. I mean, it could sound better if I threw this on there and some reverb and this and that and the other thing, but it's easy to overdo it and spend too much time dressing it up and not worrying about what's in it. So I'd rather prefer to work on what's there.
That's why compressing like on an individual channel like that, compressor's nice and simple. It does exactly what you said. Highs and lows, tames and controls them. Reverb and things like that, you don't want to put that on an individual track. You want to put that on mixes and tracks,
and buses,
actually.
Ideally.
And buses, yeah. Like those effects are part of mixing, and compressors are just like EQs. You know, sometimes you got to do it at the track level and clean things up.
And we were at the studio yesterday. We were going over some stuff, and as Joey was trying to get everybody mixed in, dialed in, because we had changed some things, changed where mics were, had people doing different things, so we had to rebalance everything. But I was just explaining to him, like, you know, just go with, you know, you can hear everything that's going on. So you can hear the guitar, you can hear the keys, you can hear the bass, you can hear the vocals, you can hear the drums. Just start with what sounds like it's the lowest, the one that we have the most difficulty raising any louder than it is currently. Make that the floor, and now match everything to that. So you take the one signal. I mean, sometimes you have a signal that's way too loud. Well, you can obviously bring that way down, no problem. But sometimes you'll have a signal that's too low, and if you can only bring it up so much, and you can't get it to fight through the mix because everything else is too much. That's where you need to figure out whether you need to bring things up or bring other things down.
Relative mixing.
Yes. To get everything to play nice together. Because once everything's playing nice together, you can boost the whole thing or cut the whole thing and get everything to work nice together. But you have to be able to get everything to be able to play nice. Sometimes you get one guitar.
You got to pick what is the signal that like you're going to relate everything to. Like a drum, especially if you're not miking the drums, like the volume you're going to get out of certain instruments might be the volume you're going to get.
Yep. And that's why, again, those would be the ones that you figure out what's going to be the most difficult to adjust and get that to where you like it. Excuse me. And then build everything else to that, whether it's bringing everybody else down and then bringing the whole signal up, or bringing individual things up and bringing the whole signal down. But it's just getting everything to play nice together and get it so you can get a well-behaved signal to as a starting point. Because so many times you'll see that people are doing mixing and they're trying to just bring things up. It's always bringing things up to match everything else. And as you're bringing it up, you're making less and less overhead. And when you look at the actual track, the WAV file later on, you get this monster brick WAV file where everything is maxed to the top the entire time. And sometimes that's just you use the mastering that's built in and it'll make it look like that even though it's okay. But if it looks like that when you're just mixing it yourself manually, then that's too high. It's like you're mixing for +6, not 0.
Yeah, your overall levels after you put multiple tracks together, your levels are going to be a lot higher than they are individual tracks. The individual tracks, you might not be hitting any peaks. Everything might look like it's all nice and leveled and nothing's
And well behaved. Yep.
Put them all together, and sometimes you will get tracks that clash or punches that all of a sudden the master does clip and peak out.
And a lot of that comes down to constructive interference, where if you've seen waves, waves in a pond, like if you threw a stone in a pond, you see the ripples going out in a circle. If those waves crash into other waves coming the other direction, if they match up a certain way, they cancel each other out to nothing. If they match the other way, they double in size. So it's about constructive interference where they'll double and destructive interference where they cancel each other out. And that's where you're getting constructive interference. Those signals are boosting each other because you might have a keyboard playing in the same range as the bass. And so both signals seem fine on their own, but when they start going together, they're reinforcing each other and boosting that low range and getting a woof all of a sudden.
And that's also why you want to be careful what effects you do put on tracks, because I've seen so many BandLab tracks where people have like a reverb on one track, a different reverb on another track.
Conflicting reverbs, yeah.
Or conflicting effects. I mean, reverb is one that's very obvious. When you have convoluted reverbs splashing against each other, it really does sound like crap.
Yep.
But chorus, I mean, there's lots of effects out there that if you start putting those on some tracks and then other tracks have other effects, and your final mix, you're hearing all this weird noise and things going on. It's those effects splashing and clashing.
Not playing nice, yeah. And again, a lot of that will come down to you spent a lot of time listening to each track individually, and you hear that one track and you worked on the effects on that one track and you basically mastered each track as its own unit, as its own individual thing. Now when you put them together, they don't all kind of sound the same. Like, with the reverbs, the one idea about having that one reverb and sending everything to that one reverb bus is that one reverb is the glue kind of that holds everything in the same room.
Use reverb as a glue. Reverb is an effect that sets up a room. It glues
shared
tracks
space
together and makes the track sound like they're in that room. Use reverbs like that first and foremost. And if you do have like a track where you want that timpani to sound like it's in a hall, but you don't want to use a hall reverb for your mix, once while you might apply a specialized track, but very rare.
Sometimes
Use
a snare
reverb
as well.
as a glue.
If you want a specific snap on that snare that you want to be different than the rest of the mix, you can have a separate channel for just the snare snap. But
You want
that
a
is
resonance.
You want resonance without it being in the way of everything else. And that's the tricky part. Because it can get ugly when they start going around. What I really liked about the, not the IRs, but the amp sim that he was talking about with the mic placement and being able to place a mic into different places, being able to put the mic a little further to the edge and hearing the difference compared to the center and hearing the difference between close in versus further back in the room. It was very eye-opening to see how that difference is, because if you try that in real life, there's a lot of times where you'll put the mic in a certain position and you'll see what it sounds like, but you didn't really audition it in different spots to see how it sounds different. That's where the mic positioning can be different, like he was doing in that amp sim. Whether you're placing the mic right on the center of the cone or off to the side, further away, experimenting with all of those during sound check and seeing what sounds better, or for different types of music, maybe it's better in this position versus that position. A bunch of different options there. I think Tony's having some connection issues there. Looks like his connection is red. Saying, oh no! And it's not the snow, because he had snow on the satellite dish the other day and it was fine. So it must be something else. But he's blipping and blooping. And that's okay. We'll let him get that straightened out.
Oh, I'm blipping
There he is.
all
And
over the
blooping.
room.
Bouncing off the walls.
What's
Yeah.
funny because I'm seeing like some are dropping, some aren't. And
And so like that one's connected over there, but this one over here, not so much.
Well, I saw you moving over there.
Yeah, there you go. So you knew that your internet connection had some connection somewhere. But I was just talking about the amp sim thing and the mic placement and how I thought that was very eye-opening and interesting. How you get the very different sounds from close up here versus back here versus off the axis versus the center.
Yeah, and you know it's the same with drum sampling, like Superior Drummer versus Easy Drummer. Benefits of Superior Drummer: you can have virtual mics. You move around the bass drum, you move around the snare. You can shape your sound with virtual mic placement.
Now, I would think that I think the one we talked about was MT Drummer. That was the free version that was similar to Easy Drummer. I'd be curious to see if that one has the same thing as the Pro Drummer does, or if it's also limited in the same way that Easy Drummer would be.
If it lets you edit your kits, and if the kits have virtual mics, you know, typically with the MIDI drums, it's basically you pick a kit and it's a MIDI kit, and you don't get to do a lot of editing on the sample.
Right. Because it is what it was when they recorded it, and that's that. But
Yeah,
in some
which
cases, they'll have a lot more option.
Which is a lot like these impulse response approach, where it's a capture of a certain mic at a certain distance with certain cab sound, and that sample allows the IR importer to condition the EQ, like he was saying, the EQ, the tonal response from the effects. It basically simulates it based on a moment in time capture.
Indeed.
Doesn't let you sculpt the sound afterwards, but it produces that sound.
So we have a request in chat here. Can we give some notes for a World Cup song? Now, are we talking notes like an A flat, an E flat, and a D flat, or are we talking notes like some ideas? That's the question. What key do you want to do it in, or you want notes in terms of what types of songs, or what would be good for a theme for a World Cup song? So, also, what would be your team? That's also important
Yeah,
when it comes to a World Cup song. Your team or your players of choice.
the team would change the flavor.
Very much. And Ange is going for the Frog on a Unicycle team. Always
as,
good.
As is tradition.
As is tradition. We should make the lights green for Ange. I'll work on that in a second. Ideas. So ideas for a World Cup song. And what team would you like? Portugal. Okay. Let's see. How would we make Ronaldo, Cristiano Ronaldo, and Portugal for a World Cup song? Well, I'm thinking for starters, it's not going to be in C. It's going to be a little bit more exotic than C. So maybe do it in G flat. So doing it in little G flat action, all the black notes.
Remember though, this is soccer, not hockey.
Exactly. So none of that. But yeah, just basically using all the black notes in pentatonics, because that way you're using G major, G flat major pentatonic, or E flat minor pentatonic. I like the G flat major pentatonic for that. And just being able to bounce around with any of those. But it also depends on if you're looking for a progression or a melody idea and that kind of thing, because all of them, instrumentation also matters. This was a percussive organ, so it's giving you more of a bouncy sound, where if we were doing like a strings, that would be a whole different thing going on. Or if we went with like cello. That cello's a little bit a little too electric. What about tremolo string? And it might be easier to see actually if I do it as this way with the Ridiculous. Because that way you could see. But I should change Ridiculous to be showing in G flat major instead of C. Tony's back.
Now, is that what you play when they win or when they score?
That's the question. And how long do you have to hold that note for goal? Because that's when you got to hold that one for a little while.
What?
I'm gonna go for G flat major.
Damn, what key are you going for there?
G flat major. Because then it's all just these. That way nothing shows up as sharps or flats. Because they're already. And that's one of those things where even just with both hands, three fingers on these two fingers on these two, and you can just kind of bounce it around. How to control or like the lyrics. Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think,
There you go.
what would soccer music sound like? Like, I can associate music to baseball, to hockey. Soccer? What does soccer sound like?
And for a rap song. So a rap song about soccer. That's
Oh, well, then, use the drum beat and make it sound like people kicking a ball and running into each other.
Let's see here. Probably like 120. But which?
Soccer rap.
A soccer rap, and I'm wondering what kind of beat would go for that. Something like. Probably not that. Euro beat. I'm not even sure what they would call it in here. What about. Oh. That could work. Bossa Nova? Definitely not slow waltz.
It
but I am
depends
thinking,
what country wins.
R&B.
Hey, that sounds like America.
And then the variation. I like the fact it also has an intro that you can do with it.
Yeah, the guy just kicked the ball in the goal, slides down the field.
And then the big finish. Da-da-da. The fake out ending. The big fake out ending. Too much. Yeah, like Andrew's saying, no auto-tune. Tell your message. Get that to tell the story. Definitely the way to do it.
No auto-tune, huh?
I'm always a fan of not using auto-tune, or if I'm going to use it, or somebody's going to use it, they use it as an effect just for, they want that effect on the voice, not to try to fix a vocal necessarily. Some people just put auto-tune on everything just because they assume it's better to have that, but you can tell it's on there and it adds that effect, which is okay sometimes, but you don't really want it on everything for sure.
Yeah, and BandLab seems to be trying to really encourage people to turn it on all, like it comes up on a vocal track ready to go, and I think sometimes it's actually on when it shouldn't be.
I think they wanted to make it, make it easy for people who don't necessarily sing well to get in and be able to sing something and have it sound good, to get them kind of motivated to try more and practice more and use it as a tool to get better, rather than use it as, oh, now I can just use this and put it on every single track I ever do, and I don't have to ever worry about singing in key. I just sing however I want, and auto-tune fixes it. Like that's where you don't want to use it that way. Use it as a spice when you want to get that particular sound in this particular song, but you don't want to rely on it all the time. And especially rap. For me, rap is one of those things where you don't need to be singing in key all the time when you're rapping. I mean, rapping is rapping. So, you could just be, speaking quickly and loudly and in whatever notes you want. You don't have to stay, in the key of A when you're rapping, for example, as you would do when you were singing.
Yeah, rapping is more of a percussive
And timing.
singing than it is pitch singing. I mean, I do like when a rapper can sing or a singer can rap. It's always a nice balance. But, if you're really a rapper, you don't have to beat yourself up if you have a tough time singing. You do the good raps and get a singer to sing those parts. That's why all the good raps these days will have, like, a Rihanna line, and then Eminem will come in and do his thing, and Rihanna will come in afterwards, and because he really can't sing for shit. But Rihanna can.
A UK kind of thing, maybe like a swing thing. Nah, I'm not gonna rap to a swing thing, but Latin fusion, a little too busy.
I could see that for soccer, actually.
Maybe slow it down a little bit. Latin fusion down at about 100.
I like that outro.
There you go.
They did a good job on that one.
And that is the Latin fusion as far as the keyboard is concerned. Rhythm
Well,
Latin fusion.
That's the music you play as you're traveling to go play the World Cup.
Yep.
That's travel music.
Exactly. And I was just going back, and that was in C and D minor, and the other part was A minor and G. Just kind of messing around there. So it was like C and D minor, A minor, and G. But I had Casio chords doing its thing, so it was kind of making it up for us, which is always fun. A little bit of cheating with the keyboard.
I can't call anything cheating anymore. All the rules have changed.
Mm-hmm. They have. What about a tango? Nah.
Actually, that felt a little soccerish.
Yeah? I can see about that. Maybe this time, though, with that G flat major like I was talking.
It's like soccer in Europe.
And that's a tango in F
Ah.
sharp, G flat.
That
And
felt
why not?
sporty. That did feel sporty, especially at the end.
Yep. Now, Bossa Nova I'm always a fan of, but I don't know if that would sound... Final Fantasy VII, yeah, a little bit of that to it. More of that than soccer, perhaps. But like Bossa Nova, with like an A minor. Go to the G on that point. back and forth between those two, A minor and the G. I think that's my mic that's buzzing or humming.
See, that's where you get a lounge singer.
Exactly.
Or Sade, Sade.
Yeah, yeah.
Sade. Oh, and you could pick a lot of different instruments to solo behind that. Really gives you a chance to figure out your expression on that mode.
Yeah, just kind of cruising around a little bit with it. And then big finish. For the bossa nova, probably not too big, but
Well, yeah, this is a tough genre to have. Oh, but that is actually a good final chord.
and that ended on the G. Can I do a UK rap? I probably can't off the top. That would definitely not be something that I would call in my wheelhouse. I do play a little bit of everything, but rapping is really not my forte.
Well, and the UK rap scene, I mean, these days really is becoming its own sound.
I tell you though, I would love to in terms of I love the lingo, for example. Like I've heard some of the UK rappers and the way that all of the UK stuff that they fit in there. I mean, I don't know the lingo well enough to do it, but when I hear it, I'm like, oh, that sounds awesome. But it wouldn't come out of me naturally if I were trying to do that.
And they seem to have a different type of aggression in their rap. Like UK rap is like rugby compared to football.
There you go.
When it
A different
comes
flavor.
to rap,
Yeah.
It's a very like raw
Distinct.
rap.
I like it. And again, some of it has to do with the choices of what you have for words that are in there, whether it's the beat that's behind it, all of that. There's so many different things that you can do because when it comes to rap, you could put rap over R&B, you could put rap over jazz, you could put rap over salsa. I mean, you could put rap over any style. So we could pick anything from the rhythm section here and make something happen.
I would say that rap is primarily driven by beat.
Yeah.
Beat tends in the rap world. Beat tends to be the motivating factor. It's like guitar and metal.
What about jazz samba? A little slower, 110. And for something like that, maybe going back and forth between D
And you really start to feel the beat as you slow it down.
a little bit repetitive on it. Let's do it. D and G.
Shit, it almost sounds like Fast Grateful Dead. Now you're talking.
And just back and forth until the big finish.
Oh, fancy finish on that one.
Big fans. Hey, Rolo, what's up?
YOLO.
Irish or American? Yeah, I mean, you could get that feel out of that for sure. There's a bunch of them that we could
Look, and
discover, have all kinds of things going on.
I'm wondering what American beats even sound like these days. Like Irish, I think I can recognize when I hear Celtic music or chords done in a certain way. Like Irish, I can usually hear it and I love it, appreciate it so much. American, I don't know what is an American sound or beat anymore.
Yeah, and someone would say the country. So like maybe
Uh,
this sounds like Amy
Johnny
Winehouse.
Cash, like a really fast Ring of Fire.
Bring it way down.
Ah, now you're galloping.
It's just C and D minor. To me, it's reminding me of Amy Winehouse.
Yeah, would you call this American?
I mean, it's country, so it's the bounce basically, and that bounce that it's doing.
Yeah,
You're just doing
country.
You're going backwards in the 1 and the 5. That's usually what that's all about. Whether it's the 5 above or the 5 below. And that's where you get that country bounce going, because that's usually what's going on in the bass end, and then whatever else kind of is keeping it happening with the rest of that rhythm. So that just keeps it very basic,
That's some Johnny Cash shit.
and that's where we just went with the. And that you could bounce that all day. But that's country, and that's bringing it down a little bit to 90 instead of 120, 110, where we were a minute ago, because bringing the speed down a little bit makes the country groove, kind of that bounce happen. Otherwise, it's like, dum, 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 and it's a little too fast. It doesn't quite work that way.
And it'd be fair to say, like, country is an American sound.
Exactly. And another one
Yeah.
that's right next to it is bluegrass. So this would be bluegrass.
But you know what has blown my mind? Some of the best country singers that I have heard in the last couple of years are not American, like at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah. I mean,
Tom Benz
I was gonna say
sounds
German.
more Nashville than anybody in Nashville.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Put a cowboy hat on that guy for sure. And with bluegrass, also at 90, it's a very simple kind of a beat. This also has that kind of a country feel, but the question is, what kind of chords will we go? So let's go like with, we'll say A minor to start with. D minor.
Yeah, the minor works good there. See, Benz could sing all over this.
I remember
What are
the
you doing,
minors.
Casio? That Casio is a maniac.
Exactly. For the minors, you have to hit 2 keys. Like for A minor, you have to hit A and another note next to it. For a D minor,
But don't you have to do the third just so it knows whether it's
no.
minor or
That's
major?
the funny thing is you don't have to do. All you have to do is hit any one note in this mode. This is Casio chord mode. Any one note is going to be a major chord. But
it
any
defaults
note
to
with
major.
any second note, no matter what the
Becomes
second
minor?
note is, becomes minor. And then if you do a third note, you get to a 7. So that's a dominant 7 chord. And then a fourth one becomes a minor 7.
See, and you know what's
And
funny?
that's it.
Some might say that's cheating with those modes, but that's just as complicated as actually playing some shit. So if your cheating is actually as complicated and you
As
have
doing
to
it the
learn
real way.
something, then you're not technically cheating at that point. You're just doing it different.
One thing is that the whole chord mode only works on everything below the F sharp here. So like, and then it's all chords after that. But if I just keep my left hand down here, let's say I'm playing in the key of A, and I just know that A major, A minor is just any second one. A7 is a third one. A minor 7 is a fourth one. So you can get to it that way. But there's also, if you go to fingered chord mode, you have to actually hit, like you were saying, if I wanted a C, like I'm hitting a C and an E and it's not actually registering anything yet, until I hit a third note. And once I hit a third note, now that's a chord. So it could be a C augmented, or it could be a minor 7 flat 5 diminished. You know, and you could like do all kinds of weird chords because you're actually hitting every single key in the chord, telling it what it should be. But this other mode where you're basically just letting it, you know, do its thing. It's going to be a major chord, or a minor chord, or a
Oh,
dominant.
damn, it's got a
Or minor
lot
7.
of boom to it.
Because it's doing the full chord.
Oh, you're getting a blast beat out of that.
Nice. And then back to normal. Because that is the tremolo strings. But bluegrass was an interesting flavor for that. And again, what it's doing with the chord mode, if we were to keep it in the minor chords, that's one thing. If you keep it in major chords, like let's say we did it in E major.
Well, something like bluegrass. Well, actually, that works.
And B major. Keeping it in major key is a lot easier with this, because now I can keep my hand on the E and the B instead of having to hit 2 notes at a time. If it was in E major. Okay, with the E to the B. And back and forth.
If
Ian.
that don't make you feel like you're riding on a horse entering into the western town, I don't know what will.
If it doesn't, then maybe like a.
Well, you hear the kind of you hear the kind of gallop and stride that it has. Like it
Yep.
does feel like you're kind of trotting along on a horse with that kind of beat. Yeah, when you add the guitar in there, it is like riding a horse in the Old West.
And again, with that bass, it's kind of doing that the balance between the 1 and the 5. And you can just bounce that all day.
See, and that's when you slap a Johnny Cash or a Loretta Lynn on top of it and like, yeah, we got a song.
Yep. And that's where the strumming pattern comes in, because once you have that as like a bass, if you come in with a little bit of bum chicka bum chicka bum chicka bum chicka bum chicka bum chicka bum in the way you're actually strumming, then that adds that whole extra layer on top of that, and it all kind of gels together.
Oh, and you can speed it up that way.
Oh yeah.
By giving it that rhythm, that slow gallop becomes more like, oh, we're riding now.
Now, what would be township? A rhythm called township.
Township? That's a new one to me. Where?
I can dig that.
That's one of the Casios?
Oh yeah, this is called township, and it's rhythm number 92, and we're gonna play it in A flat major.
It's funny. The beat by itself feels one way. Once the music kicks in with it, I feel like a totally different genre.
It does. This is like even just a nice intro just by itself.
Well, yeah, the drums by themselves really have a lot of attitude. It's somewhat tribal. It's like pop tribal. Okay, now you might be making a soccer celebration sound. Depending on who wins, this sounds like a parade song for the winners.
They're bouncing along on the way down. Yep. But like you said, as soon as you add the full chords.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Does that change?
Those chords change it to travel music again. Now I'm in a car or I'm on a boat.
I was thinking the islands, yeah. I'm on a boat at the islands.
Although this would work as the team's flying back home. Yay, we won! This is the music you listen to as you're flying back home.
I like it. I gotta stop hitting that one. That's what I did last time. It's fun.
I hear a potential bridge in there.
Definitely would have to be
I know
something
where
else
I
to change
would
it up.
go. I know where I would go.
So we're starting with the.
That's one of those beats where I would try one of the mallet instruments, like the
Ooh, yeah.
marimbas or the something that's kind of plucky or bright, but at the same time rolls.
Organ, maybe dulcimer,
Dulcimer might work.
marimba.
Dulcimer is always a fun one to play with because you never know what you're gonna get.
Marimba.
See, and that's always an interesting patch because you can approach it percussively or melodically, and you can have a lot of fun with that kind of sound.
Especially if you did start going into, like, let's say A minor to a G, right? And again, breaking the chord up.
And it works. What I love with that patch, it works just as good with the chords as it does with the arpeggios.
And just doing little broken chords like that kind of adds a little bit of interest to whatever you're doing without making it crazy.
Yeah, and you're actually giving it a beat. The doom ba doom ba doom ba doom boom. You're giving it the beat.
Yep, that's where you get that little bit of a percussive thing happening, but you're also kind of feeding into that, and you could make it so that if somebody else was playing a guitar or whatever else, they could be chirp chording back at you to get that going, or they could be soloing, and you're holding that rhythm down so that they feel the progression happening. It's important when you're comping or playing with other people. You need to be able to, somebody has to be establishing a rhythm that keeps everything tied together so it doesn't just kind of have everybody wandering off.
Yeah, and I realized something last Saturday. I was testing Restream and jamming over, here with Joe and Paul, and it was the first time that like I got to work with Paul where I had a camera, like I could see his camera the whole time while we were jamming, and we were timing off of each other and actually looking at each other, and I was like,
Nice.
wow, this is the closest to real jamming that I've had in 20 years.
Nice. Yeah. And that's the way to do it. And it's just a matter of, feeling that connection, being able to be on the same page, feeling those, feeling what's coming in the music, feeling where everyone's trying to go to. Like you were saying, you feel that next section coming, that's good.
Getting to see that guitarist's hands moving on the neck and having it work fast enough, like
without
the nice,
latency,
yeah. The nice thing with Restream, the audio latency was almost non-existent, and the camera latency, Zoom's a little slow and sluggish, but like I could watch Joe and see his changes in real time.
Nice. It's important.
I
Being
didn't
able to
know.
see, stay on the
I
same
didn't
page.
know what the hell he was changing to. I'm still like trying to figure out.
The important thing, though, is seeing the change, like seeing position 1 and position 2, even if all you see is the hand went from here to here, or the hand went from this claw to this claw, like seeing that change is enough. You don't have to know that this is an E major and that's an A minor or whatever. Just knowing that it changed from this to something else, from A to B, from 1 to 2, you know?
It told me I had to figure out 5 different chords to get this part.
There you go.
5 different changes to get the whole riff.
And stay in key the whole time. Excellent.
Now, if I can get him hooked up to Meticulous, and that's something to put into our homework list. A easy way for a guitarist to show what notes they're playing. The same way we can see it with this keyboard right now.
Now, one way would be if I just change the instrument to guitars.
See,
like that.
now you can show the guitar tab from what you're playing on your keyboard.
Correct.
The next challenge for us is for somebody to play on a guitar and take that audio and turn it into the MIDI necessary for this to
Technically,
show.
we could probably do that even just with my Rocksmith. I do still have that Rocksmith cable where I have a cable that I can plug my guitar in USB right to the computer. And with the Rocksmith app, as I'm playing, it's showing on screen. But in this case, you know, a G major chord. Like you can see all the notes showing up on the neck there, and that's not the way they would show up on a guitar. Like if you were playing a G major chord, like that's just 3, but you'd normally be playing, like I was saying, the way you stack chords is different. So it would be like a G, a D, like that normal mode, G, D, and then another G, and then.
It's funny now. You're trying to think like a guitarist on a keyboard, huh?
Yep, and that's the chord that's the shape that you would expect. That's the E, the movable E shape they would call that, because we're going from because it's a full 6-string bar chord, and now you can see that you would call the tab for that starting with that 3 down here. That would be 3, 5, 5, 4, 3, 3, 3, 5, 5, 4, 3. Is what you would call that in tab. And that does show you the movable E-shaped bar chord. Because now if you did that same chord, but you did that in the key of C.
Different claw, huh?
No, it should be the same claw. I just have it in a... Got to figure out how to tell it.
Well, yeah,
I wanna
it's
do
possible Meticulous's transcribing,
Transposing,
may not be.
Oh, if I do it down there, maybe.
We'll have to test that.
That's putting it as... yeah, sort of. Interesting. We'll have to figure it out. There's ways to force it to do what we want. But the main idea is that if I do just play a triad, it'll just show you the 3 notes, and it should put them in a better position than that. Like one is like way down and the others are together. If you were playing triads on a guitar, obviously you're not playing a note way down there and a note way up over there and a note in the middle at the same time. It should keep them in a little claw together, but it's not.
And
So it's weird.
there's different tab software out there when it comes to displaying that would be worth taking a look at, and because I really want to start learning that guitar, and it's
Absolutely.
gonna be this way.
Yeah, and that's one of those things with the claws. Like once you figure out and bringing everything down to triads, even there was another lesson. We're not going to look at it today, but there was one we were looking at previously where it was talking about the triad positions, and we were saying if you had the different inversions, like your root 3/5 versus 3/5 root versus 5 root 3, those 3 different positions would be 3 different claws. Once you learn those 3 different claws in a few different positions, like on the skinniest 3 strings, you can do, this claw, and this claw. And then on the next set of 3 strings, it's this claw, and this claw. And then on the next set of 3 strings, it's going to be this one, and this one. So like you can change it. Once you remember each of those sets of claws to work on, you now know how to move through all the triads, and that can get you from hand position 1 to 2 to 3 and be able to move around the neck in whatever key you want to play in.
tell you, Meticulous doesn't make some of those claws look easy because one of those had a big ass stretch.
Yeah, but that's the thing is that that's where this is definitely not right. Where I'm just playing a triad, it would never you would never play a triad with the notes that far away from each other.
Yeah, I don't think I don't think it converts over to the guitar tab.
It doesn't
as,
do a good job
as
of that.
logically, because it's a whole different it's a whole
This
different
part does
approach to where you're gonna actually fret.
When I start with root 5 octave, it does do what I would do on a guitar, where you're doing that low note and then these two relative to it, it moves them into the right place. So that's correct. And then a third above that, all of a sudden it moves the whole chord away where it should be right in that same place. And you wouldn't do a stretch like that or that. It's like all of these are messy stacks, but the idea is sound, that you can, like, for individual notes, I could say, you know, give me a G, and look, there's a G way up there. Give me a D, and there's one over there.
Well, you're
Give me
playing
an A,
some
there's one over
you're
there.
playing some complex shit on that guitar through your keyboard.
And that's the thing that's weird, is when you're playing chromatics like that, you should just see one dot, like, going up and down, like, just moving straight up, because I'm just doing individual fret, like moving one fret up or down. Sort of. So yeah, it's not a perfect translation, but that's something that we could look at. And if we were to look at...
Actually, you know where I want to look is over in Cakewalk. There is a tab view, just like you can bring up staff and keyboard.
Yep.
I'm curious to see how it translates over there. I mean, it probably will have the same obstacles that Meticulous does, where, you know, there's a certain amount of logic that says you don't want to fret over there because that just wouldn't be the smart way to do it.
Right.
But I do have some guitar-centric plugins that might actually be smart enough to fret properly.
Now the other question is, for, like, this is now a 5-string bass, right? So if I were doing a bass line where I'm doing, like, root 3/5, can't even see where it is on there.
It's all the way up there.
Okay. Yeah, there we go. So if we're down here, this is C, but that's not a C. It doesn't matter. But root 3/5, you see how it's kind of going up the neck there. You're going from the 5th fret to the 9th fret to the 12th fret. And normally you would be doing it all at the 9th fret, where you would start with the one that's right there next to it. But that's one of the things where, again, it's not taking the spacing into consideration on the guitar neck. You would, instead of going up and down that one string like that, you'd be going from the string below up to this string for these two notes, and then back to that one. So you'd be, like, down here, and, you know.
Well,
But you can see how, like,
yeah,
that's like a 1, 2, 3.
technically you can hit the same notes on multiple strings.
Correct.
With guitars and basses.
Like right here, that's C, D, and E. C, D, E, and you can see how the relationship between them, it's a whole step between each of those. So it's just going from the 5th to the 7th to the 9th. So if you were on your bass or on a guitar and you went to the 5th fret on the thickest string, you would actually be getting, it would be, at that case, it would be A, B, C sharp. Because you're on the 2nd string would be the A string.
So
if you were the fattest string at the 5th fret.
If you were to write tab AI to determine what's the best way to hit this note, do I want to hit it on this string way down here? Do I want to hit it on this string way up there? If you were making tab AI, you'd be looking at, like, the tonic note, like the root notes, whatever the chord that you're trying to do, that logically would fit where you're playing the rest of the notes.
Yep, and it has to do with both where you are as far as what you're playing. Like, I just grabbed the bass to play. You also get a different sound, a different timbre of the notes, because if you're playing, let's say, a good one is for the low D, let's say, all right? So if I'm playing a D on a 4-string bass, you're usually playing a D up at the 5th fret on the A string. And it's kind of a higher note, because the lowest note you can get to on a 4-string bass is that low E. Right, so you've got that low E, is as low as you can get. This D is up here. On a 5-string, I can get down to that D.
Is it
It's
a
below
B?
that low E.
What the extra
The
string
lowest
on the
open
5 strings
one.
is
It's tuned to a B if it's open.
B?
So that's a low B, same as the second fret on the A string. So that's that low B. But if I play it on the 3rd fret on that low B string, that's a D. So that's the same as the 5th fret up here. Because octaves are 2 strings down and 2 frets over. And then on the picking hand, I'm just kind of going back and forth between the thumb and the middle finger.
So you choose which one you're going to use to make that note based on what your fingers can do. And what
Based on what your fingers can do, but
feels
also based on where the rest of the song is sending you. So, like, if you're staying up in this area of the neck, you have the option of going to the fatter strings instead of having to move all the way back out here. You
Yeah,
can stay in this neighborhood and use the
if
fatter
the
string.
direction kind of dictates, like, oh, I'm moving up the neck, then heading in that direction makes sense to continue to move everything else up or down.
Yep, and it also has to do with the patterns. Like if I'm playing in A, let's say, A minor pentatonic. So that's like a root, an octave, a 7, a 5, a 4, and a 3. And then if I want to do the same thing in B with the same notes, it's the same relative position, so it's the same notes you're hitting. Whether you're doing it in A or you're doing it in B. So it's the same motions, whereas on a keyboard, if you're playing in A versus B, you have different numbers of sharps and flats, so you have to work around that. On the guitar, it doesn't matter, or on the bass, it doesn't matter. You're just sliding up a fret or sliding down a fret, doing the same patterns. And that's why once you get a pattern down, like once you know your pentatonics, you can just move it around and you're good.
Every fret for you is your half step.
Yep. So you're going, if we wanted to move chromatically just on the A string or the low E string, just like going up on a keyboard, hitting every note.
Yeah.
Because that's, you got to be able to get to them all. On a fretless, you would have all that in between. Everything in between would be smooth. It wouldn't be going da 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 da. It would be going like very smooth.
And on a fretless, you really gotta feel your zone.
I was playing the fretless yesterday, actually, at the studio, and then I switched when we started recording. I was like, let me switch over to the 5-string again. So I switched it back over. But some of the slides I do, I actually do the slides on the 5-string because if you do it fast enough, it sounds, you don't hear the incremental, hitting every note on the way past. It does sound more smooth if you do it fast enough. But if you do it slow, you'll hear it actually going each note.
Yeah.
And I like to do it like if I'm coming in, if I'm trying to land to start a song there, or come up. It's kind of ambiguous slides from wherever to get to where you're trying to get to. But just like fun stuff like that as far as where you're positioning. I also like doing chord slides like the, was it Lou Reed? And that's actually one of the keys for doing bass chords is I'm actually hitting like a root here, which this would be on the 5th fret, and then 3 strings away on the 6th fret, and that's the major third because that's the octave of this note. But if I hit it here, it sounds muddy if I hit them together. So that's why on a bass you'll actually move that third up an octave. And if we were doing it minor, instead we do it at the 2nd fret. And that's just basically keeping it on the same fret. So it would be for minor, if it's on 12, it's 12 and 12. But if it's major, it's 12 and 13. But you don't really do a lot of bass chords, but if you do want to throw them in, that's kind of a neat sound to get in there.
Those were good examples of where they are useful. That whole
Gotta love
Lou
that.
Reed start with the bass like that was a part of the song. Like people hear that and they know it's that song.
Yep. And that's
Very
one of those that
distinguished.
I'll do that a lot of times when I'm doing a sound check, just making sure I've got sound on the bass, and I'll just hit that first note, and when I slide to that second one, you see a bunch of heads pop up, like what?
Oh, did he just play 2 notes on the bass?
Exactly, because most people don't, or if you do, I mean, again, it sounds really muddy if you're trying to play.
You can only do it where it works.
But
When you do it
you
where it
stretch.
doesn't work, you hear it.
Yep. And that's where using that fat Easter or the fat string again on the bottom, if you go down to the very, very lowest chord that you can do there, the basically is the B major down here, using that low B. And it's just 2 notes, but that's a B chord, B major, and then you can slide that in. But that's some deep stuff. It doesn't come through all the time because that low B is low.
It's got bass. That's what the B stands for.
Bass. And that's also where when you start thwapping the strings like that, sometimes it gets really loud. That's where the compressor comes in handy too. Some people when they're doing the slapping and all that, they're trying to like slap it right at where the neck meets the body. You hit it with the thumb, but you're trying to hit through the string to get it to actually. But it's not easy. And the whole slapping and popping, like a lot of times you're using both hands, so you're trying to like mute with this hand and mute with that hand. So you're like,
Yeah, some of these bassists you've been showing me, like, since we started doing this, the ones who do that snap, crackle, pop kind of shit are the most advanced bass I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's,
and that's
it's
where
an
they got some
evolving
crazy style.
art.
Yep. And that's where Victor Wooten is a good example of where he can just make amazing things happen on a bass.
That's the one I'm thinking of. Like,
yeah, exactly.
My impression of bass changed after watching his performances.
He's done entire songs using harmonics on a bass. So like it's not the E, but like that E. Harmonics right there on each of the strings. There's different places you can get them, but I mean, he's just literally every note in the song is one of those harmonics, and it's the right one. So he's just all over on a 4-string bass.
I swear he's invented a couple of new techniques with the way.
Yeah. The double thumb is one of my favorite, where he's using the thumb, but instead of just like plucking through the string one way, he actually uses the thumb as if it's a pick and just goes dugga 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 dugga. So he can go like dugga 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 dugga. So he's just using his thumb and going up and down across the strings like that, but managing to use it as a pick, like and do things with the fretting head at the same time.
Yeah, he produces this wild sound.
But yeah, he's got a lot of crazy techniques. But he's spent a lot of time with the bass and just saying, hey, what happens if I do this? What happens if I do that? And just figuring it out. And that's where spending those 10,000, 100,000, however many hours and hours and hours, just always with the instrument in the hand, figuring out what's what.
If you want to play bass, spend a couple of those hours watching Wooten,
Yeah.
and
Oh, yeah.
you will learn just watching.
I would say the Victor Wooten Groove Workshop was the video where I've seen just a couple of excerpts on YouTube, but I also had the whole full video. It was like a 2-hour long video, but it was basically a class where Victor Wooten and Anthony Wellington both had their bass and had a classroom full of, say, 7 people or 5 people. It was like a small group, but everybody in the audience or in the class also had their bass. So it was like, okay, Steve, play us whatever, and then Steve just picks up his bass. He's all plugged in. He just starts playing something for him. Okay, now this time do the same thing, but before you start, take 2 measures and just hear the drums in your head, and get the drums going in your head before you start playing. And then play the same thing you just played us. And he did it again, and it sounded amazing compared to the first time. And it's because...
What a great way to learn in a class like that.
Yeah, and the big thing was, if he says, just play whatever song, and if you just jump right into it, your timing's not necessarily right, you're going to rush parts, and other parts are slow. So take that first couple measures to actually think about the song, have the song playing in your head, and then jump on board with it. And it just makes such a difference to being able to jump on board with the song, get the rhythm going in your head so that you know where it's going. It's already coming around, and now you're just jumping in where you're already, the song's already going. When people seem to have a big problem is if you're with people who aren't used to recording, and you say, okay, I'm going to press record now, go. and it's like they hear, just go, oh, and now they
And
can't get into that rhythm to start now.
Some freeze up. They're
Yeah.
like deer in headlights.
Yep. And in those cases, that's where I like to just keep a recorder running the whole session, so that
Yeah.
it's just running, and we're just doing our thing. And okay, this take, we'll try this, we'll try that. We're relaxed, we're doing everything. And if the one perfect take comes out, it's already recorded. We just have to chop that part.
Yeah, for band jams and like, collabing that way, that's the best approach. We should do a bass night one night, and
Oh, yeah.
we'll check out Wooten and all the great bassists,
And Scott's Bass Lessons is the one I would definitely jump to as a resource.
especially if he's got another contest coming, because his
Giving away
contest.
$40,000 worth of gear again, yeah. He gives away some nice stuff. So for Fodera basses, he had some crazy stuff.
Yeah, there's one to think about maybe for next week, bass night.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And not only that, I might even borrow the fretless from Joey's studio, and that way I'll have a fretless and a 5-string in the house, and we can look at some differences.
Sweet. I want to hear you on the fretless.
Yeah, it'd be fun. I end up doing a lot of silly sliding around, sounding like whale song just because it's fun.
Right, and
What's up, Spark Rap?
You really can on there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, on the fretless, you can definitely do a whole lot of whale song. And that was the other thing, is that you're not constricted to the 12 notes that we use on a keyboard here. So you can also do Indian music. You can do Eastern music where you're doing microtonal stuff, where you've got 24 notes in between or 1,000,000 notes in between C and C, because there's no frets. So you can play wherever you want. Total freedom. It's anarchy, I say.
You just have to find the place that sounds good.
Yes, that's the key. It should sound good. That would be a good place to start. Let's start with the stuff that sounds good, and then we can narrow down from there.
But the fretless will definitely force you to recognize pitch and match it.
Yes.
Otherwise, you're not going to be able to play that.
Now, also with the fretless, I like to make sure that it's in tune. Like, even though you're using your ear to find where the right notes are, it's also helpful that if the open strings are actually in tune, then where the lines are drawn on the neck are where you're actually shooting for. Those are the targets, so it makes it easier to visually find where you're going if the bass is in tune.
Relative tuning still matters.
And relative tuning still matters, absolutely. But you can do relative tuning just by ear. That's one of those where you can just hit the 5th fret. You can hit a harmonic on the 5th fret on one and the 7th on the other, and you'll hear it. That's one of those things for when you're tuning, whether it's a guitar or a bass. The hearing instead of just the main note, if you hit a harmonic on the 5th and the 7th on the next string, that's the same note. So it's a little hard to hear, but you would hear like a wah 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 if they're close but not quite on. The low ones are hard though. So that would be tuning by ear, but then you can also just get a clip-on, tuner, or use the BandLab tuner and tune one of your strings and then tune the rest to that so that they all match.
Yeah,
For me, I actually, instead of tuning the open strings, I like to tune on the frets.
I'm getting better at hearing when two notes meet.
Yeah.
Now that like my ear's gotten trained in the last couple years towards like perfect harmony.
One way to simulate it is actually what we were talking about before. These two are the same note. Not those. Those two are the same note. And they sound the same. But if I bend one a little bit, you can hear how this is higher. And you can hear it going wah, 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 wah.
Yep.
Or if I bend the other one higher and that one was lower. So that's where you can kind of hear those differences, but the idea is that the differences come out even more when you're just doing the harmonics at the 5th and 7th, for example. On a guitar, if you have like a really good tone, but on a bass, it doesn't come through as well. So for the bass, I do like to use an actual clip-on tuner and get the notes actually where I want them. But you have to make sure your intonation's good too, and that's where you check at the 12th fret to make sure that the 12th fret sound matches the open sound, matches the harmonic at the 12th fret sound. If all three of those match perfectly, then you're in good shape. And you should also be able to tune and make sure that at every fret, it sounds like the note that it's supposed to sound like. And that'll tell you that your neck is well adjusted and well put together, and your intonation is right, and you don't have to make any other adjustments to the lengths of the strings. Because back here is where you would adjust those. Each one is, in its own spot based on making the strings, again, make it so the sound like the open string and the 12th harmonic and the 12th note fretted gently are the same. they're not. If one's higher, like this one probably is a little bit higher, I have to probably adjust that low B string and bring it, to make it so that that note is the same as that note and that note. But that's for a bass tech session someday.
Yeah.
We'll go through over a setup.
Gear whores,
Gear
bass style.
Bass edition.
We're working on it.
Yeah, we'll get there. But that's the thing is we got bass stuff, we got guitar stuff, we got key stuff, we got computer stuff, we got songwriting stuff.
We learned how to avoid some, bad practices.
Yep. Repetitive
with-
stress injuries.
Yeah, carpal tunnel. That's something.
The importance of ergonomics.
If you feel like if you feel when you're playing too much, learn
Step
more
back.
about that and take some of those suggestions and avoid it because you can do some damage.
And nobody wants that. Because that would be bad. And it is 12:15. What?
Yeah, time
what?
flies. Well, I'm ready to rock it.
Yeah, it's time to rock it. So thanks everybody for joining us. Sorry if you guys just showed up here because we're kind of at the end of the night.
We'll
But-
be back next week.
We'll be back on Thursday with more talking shh.
And they'll be back tomorrow night. We got an interview with James Finona.
Yeah. Yep.
Great interview. And then
Nice.
SR is actually going to be trying out some cool new stuff. So
Excellent.
interested to see what goes on there. Joe's going to be in on Saturday with the Sewer. Jason on Monday with Metal Monday. Aviva and Chris on Tuesday. Always. Oh, and
Our
Jeremy
plan
and
is
Cal
coming
right
together.
after.
Our plan is coming together.
And after all that, Ange comes out on Wednesday with Wally. Wally does motivation, and Ange whips us all into shape.
And then we're back at it on Thursday.
Yep. And we will be back.
Yes. And thanks all for joining us. And we will see you guys next time on Talking Shh. IT with Glenn and Tony.
Night, everyone.
Bye-bye.